shit, there's only 647. There's only 647 pages in this. That's crazy. Oh my god. Hello. Also, I actually think I might be a bit I don't think I'm a little bit colorblind, but I went to the nail salon today because I'd broken all my nails in Seattle, and I was like, hey, all my nails chipped. I need to get them redone. And then, like, I went, and the color wasn't as green, but now I'm like, I just have really bright green nails, and I'm not paying to get them redone for at least 2 weeks. So for the next 2 weeks, I'm just gonna have really, really bright green nails. And I'm like, at first I wasn't sure about them, but now I'm like, you know what? They're kind of cute. They're kind of cute. I'm kind of loving it. Yeah, I'm like, honestly, it might be a vibe. It kind of is. Other than that, it's time for the final volume. Crazy. It's the final volume. I don't really know how to feel. I can't believe it's almost done. Like, I have today, tomorrow, and then Sunday is like the last day. Crazy. I also, I need to just like have the copyright fixed. But I've talked about it. I also filmed while I was down in Seattle, so that video should be up. That video should be up in a few hours after stream. So that'll be cool if you want to check that out. Have at her. It's kind of a disaster, but it's not bad. It's truly not bad. Without further ado, though, we've got about 15. I think it was, because how long am I reading today? Oh my god, no, I have like 16 chapters today. I'm reading till 1370. I might have to change that, because I'm like thinking about how much time I have. I don't know if I have enough time now, but we will see. We will see. Okay, regardless though, I have starting to read. This says to 1370. Let me double check something really quick. It might be... Okay. No, we're just gonna have to lock in. Okay. Chapter 1354, This Night. Late at night, the clanging sound of the door and the windows opened woke Wendell up from his deep sleep. He warily rolled off the bed and surveyed his surroundings. What happened? Utopia entered a super heavy storm? It wasn't easy for the recently insomniac Wendell to fall asleep, but he had no choice but to get out of bed. His mind was still lethargic, and he looked rather lost. He soon realized that there was no wind blowing in from the open window, nor did it rain even. Nor did the rain enter. It was like it had opened it while sleepwalking to take fresh air. Wendell suddenly thought of supernatural events that had experienced and learned from the dossier, as he reminded of the fear of the unknown to once ruled his heart. He didn't know what else would happen next, nor could he guess what we would encounter. He felt a chill run down his back and shivered again. At this moment, he heard the commotion outside of the door. All sorts of voices entered his ears. There was a loud sound of running, the sound of judgment, the declarations of orders to be charged, and the unconcealed shouts. Something is wrong with the underground seal. Be on high alert. Underground seal? What kind of seal? What kind of item is sealed beneath the Iris' hotel? Wendell was surprised and confused. He couldn't help but walk to the door and look around. He then saw an MI9 colleague who he barely knew, a Colonel Shiodorecha, who was on duty tonight. Did MI9 find Utopia because of me? They're here to handle the abnormality. Wendell instinctively frowned just as the thoughts flashed through his mind. He discovered that the corridor outside was completely different from the Iris' hotel. Not only was there gas lamps on both sides, but there was also classical candle stands. The floor was very bright, and the ceiling was more than 3 meters high. This isn't the Iris' hotel. Wendell suddenly turned around and sized up the room he was in. He quickly recognized that this was his sleeping quarters at MI9 headquarters. His luggage was placed quietly in the corner without any signs of movement. Wendell clearly remembered that he had headed to Utopia through the washrooms in his room. He wasn't too confident in the process, so he didn't bring his luggage. and only held the subpoena from Utopia's court. Tap, tap, tap. He quickly ran to the window and looked outside. What greeted his eyes was the garden and lawn at MI9 headquarters. I'm back in Backland again? Or perhaps I didn't return to Utopia at all. I was just too tired and ended up having a dream in my sleep. Wendell dazedly walked back to his bed and sat down. After about 10 seconds, he suddenly jumped up and picked up his coat from the ground. Then he saw the Utopia's subpoena in his inner pocket and coat when it should be inside a drawer. Wendell fell silent, as though he'd become a statue. Travel columnist Monica also woke up from the banging on the doors and the windows. She sat up straight, pulled the blanket up, and placed it in front of her chest. The sleepy-eyed Monica's first reaction was the robber had barged into her hotel. She was about to scream and call for the police, but in the next 10 to 20 seconds, Monica didn't hear any footsteps entering the room. However, there were more people gathered around the corridor. What happened? It doesn't seem like a hurricane. Was it a prank? Damn clown. If I knew who it was, I would definitely kick his ass hard. The voices of discussions were mixed with all kinds of curses. Monica didn't think much of it when she heard it. Instead, she thought of using the crowd's discussions to consider the reasons underlying the paranormal activity and write it in her travel column. But as she listened, she gradually realized something was amiss. How could Iris's hotel have so many guests? She remembered clearly that on this floor there were almost 5 rooms with guests. This included her room. At that moment, Monica thought of the ghost stories she had heard. She immediately felt as if there were wraiths and shadows outside. She had originally stretched her feet towards the bedside, preparing to leave the room, participate in the discussion, and gasp more than details of her writing material. But now she retracted her feet and curled into a ball, trembling. A few seconds later, she heard a man say, "I asked a hotel owner, and he said that he had no idea what had happened. Perhaps there was a short storm just now. Return to your room and get some rest. Remember to lock the windows." Yawn. "I have to get up early tomorrow to go to the Royal Museum." Royal Museum? Monica was stunned. As a travel columnist, as a traveler who had been in Utopia in a long time, she naturally knew that there was no Royal Museum. In the Lowen Kingdom, a museum with such royal name would definitely be in Backland. To take a steam locomotive from Utopia to Backland requires many hours. Even if he woke up early, he wouldn't be able to arrive before the Royal Museum closed. Monica was puzzled. She slowly lifted the blanket. She heard the sound of the door and windows closing continuously. She got out of her room carefully and walked towards the door. During this process, she gradually saw the room turn through the moonlight. Hiss. Monica almost screamed. This wasn't the guest room she had slept in previously. Regardless of the layout or arrangements, they were completely different. The ghost stories that she had thought of earlier surged into her mind again, causing her legs to give way, and she almost couldn't support herself. Just as Monica's teeth were chattering, she saw a hotel name card on the table. It was prepared for guests. If she brought it out, she would be able to someone to guide her back when she was at a loss, even if she didn't know the language. Monica subconsciously approached it and used the moonlight to identify the words and the name on the card. Carl Pensa Hotel, Backland, Westboro, 19 Morning Street. Backland, Westboro. Backland. Monica's eyes widened. She felt like the space and time had gone topsy-turvy. Backland, Helstonboro, in a house with a fireplace. Forrest heard the door and the windows open, but she didn't immediately wake up. This was because she had fallen into a strange nightmare she couldn't break free. She dreamt that her teacher Dorian Gray Abraham had been influenced by the family's sealed artifact, dying in front of her with blood dripping. She dreamed that she had lost control and mutated, turning into a series of starlight insects and wrapped in the shape of the doors. She couldn't help but fly towards the door of flesh and blood. She dreamed that the apocalypse had dawned and the surging of blood-colored tide had drowned the entire world, preventing Shio, Garamond Sparrow, and company from escaping. Finally, Forrest escaped the dream and sat up, panting heavily. As a demigod who was once an astrologer, she knew what such a dream meant. She hurriedly suppressed her emotions and looked up ahead. The glass in the oriel window with the bedroom all bore open at the same point in time. Something must have happened. Furthermore, it has a certain relationship with the apocalypse, the Abraham family, and the apprentice pathway. Forrest silently muttered to herself before standing up and wearing a cloak, preparing to teleport to her teacher and confirm his safety. Such a change made her feel a sense of urgency towards advancing Sequence 3 or even Sequence 2. After learning about the apocalypse from Mr. Fool and the world Garamond Sparrow, Forrest had actually been working hard, but the secret sorcerer potion wasn't something that she could digest in a short period of time. Furthermore, without making any contribution, she couldn't bring herself to ask her teacher for the wandering formula and ingredients. Of course, if she was willing, she could have obtained it from Mr. Dorr. However, how could she have been bewitched after receiving all kinds of reminders? Phasing away, Forrest vanished from the room. A few seconds later, she appeared in Dorian Gray Abraham's residence and saw her teacher sitting there, pressing down on his heart as though he had been frightened. Do you need medicine? Fours asked carefully. She had purchased medicine from Mr. Moon and treated ailments of age. Dorian took a deep breath and shook his head. There's no need. Fours immediately relaxed. Teacher, I dreamt that you were affected by the negative effects of the sealed artifact. The windows and doors around me had undergone unnecessary changes, so I came over to take a look. Dorian looked up at the window, opened, and said with a serious expression, Your dream wasn't wrong. I nearly died just now, but at the most critical moment, the seal came into effect. Having said that, he suddenly stood up and said to Fours, Quick, bring me somewhere else. I'm worried that something might happen if the other family members. Without any hesitation, Fours immediately grabbed her teacher's arm and asked for an exact location. The figures rapidly faded away and disappeared. After traveling through the spirit world that was covered in gray fog for several seconds, Fours and Dorian suddenly left their present environment and landed in the place that looked like a study. There were quite a few people standing there. There were even members of the Abraham family who wielded different sealed artifacts that could travel. Vilos, why are all of you here? Dorian blurted out. Vilos and the others shook their head at the same time, both confused and terrified. In the next second, countless dazzling stars appeared out of the void. The starlight quickly gathered together, turning into objects that fell to the ground, one after another. There was a miniature door of starlight, a crystal ball formed from insects, and there was a translucent, strange-looking key, a resplendent torch that burned slightly. For some reason, names after names appeared in Dorian and company's minds. Sequence 3 Wanderer beyond a characteristic, Sequence 4 Secret Sorceress beyond a characteristic, Sequence 1 Key of Stars beyond a characteristic, Sequence 2 Planeswalker beyond a characteristic. Furthermore, there was just one of each beyond a characteristic. There were even 2 Sequence 1 Keys of Stars beyond a characteristics. In addition, there were 3 Planeswalker beyond a characteristics, and even more of the rest. The key members of the Abraham family and Fours slowly turned to gape, unable to close them for a long time. By the time all the beyond a characteristics dropped to the ground, nothing abnormal happened again. And there was silence. The nearly frozen silence lasted for nearly 10 seconds, before the Abraham family members uniformly cast their gaze at Fours. After sensing the mixed emotions and wariness, guardedness, and fear, Fours took the initiative to take a few steps aside and be warned. Be careful of the negative effects. Even if the Beyonder characteristics had infused with the surroundings and formed sealed artifacts, they contained certain negative effects. However, most of the time it would only have effects from direct contact. Of course, the Beyonder characteristics were all high sequence Beyonder characteristics. No one could be certain if they would be actively expand in the area of influence. Seeing that Fours didn't show any obvious greed, Dorian nodded and said, When you finish digesting the Secret Sorcerer potion, you can consider advancing to Sequence 3 Wanderer. I'll give you the potion formula and prepare the corresponding ingredients for you. Of course, at this level, the higher the sequence, the greater the danger you face. This is an objective situation, doesn't change because of your personal will and arrangements. When the time comes, you can decide whether you wish to advance or not. Hi! He said these words because he cared for his students, and on the other hand, he wanted to assure that whatever the Abraham family possessed, the equivalent of her possessing it, no one would treat her as an outsider and deliberately make things difficult for her on the matter of raising her sequence. This could effectively eliminate the heat brought by greed, and after obtaining so many high sequence Beyonder characteristics, Velos and other members of the Abraham family weren't unwilling to part with the Wanderer Beyonder characteristic. They even believed that using it for exchange for peace was absolutely worth it. After all, there was only one demigod here, Fours. With the time to bring out their grade 0 sealed artifacts, and because the ineffectiveness of the seals, the Abraham family members didn't dare take out most of the grade 1 sealed artifacts. Under such a situation, Fours had the ability to finish all of them off. Faced with their teacher's promise, Fours tersely acknowledged. Was the door to the concealed space opened? She thought that the high sequence beyond a characteristic in front of her were all from the Abraham family's treasury vault that had been thrown into the real world due to the recent abnormality. However, she didn't feel that there were too many of them. No, that's okay, bye! No. Dorian slowly shook his head, looked confused. The other Abraham family members remained silent, equally confused. No one would believe that the treasure would fall from the skies unless it happened before their eyes. Should we pray to Mr. Fool? Fours tried giving a suggestion. Dorian, who had a vague guess, immediately looked at the other Abrahams. He saw the ones who had changed faiths to Mr. Fool nod in agreement. The ones who hadn't changed faiths were clearly hesitant and eager to object. After some consideration, Dorian composed himself and said, "Gather the ones who negative area of effect traits while using the correct method. Prevent them from combining with the surroundings. All pray to Mr. Fool at the side." All right. A few members of the Abraham family hesitated for 2 seconds before agreeing. Following that, they sized up the opportunity to identify the characteristics and attempt to gather them. For some of the members had obtained a certain amount, Dorian's family repeated... Okay, here's the thing. I think Adam's scary because you know Amon's not going to be on your side. Adam, you don't know whether he is or isn't on your side. And if he is on your side, you don't know if a better opportunity is going to come for him to betray you. Where it's like with Amon, you can always guarantee that he's not going to be on your side, you know? Like, you can always trust a lying man to lie. You can't always trust a truthful man to tell the truth. That's like my principle. With those two, as I'm like, I don't know. And bowed his head to pray to Mr. Fool. Soon a grayish-white fog in an ancient palace deep in the fog appeared in front of him. A high and solemn voice resounded in his ears. "These are the relics of Mr. Dor. Your bloodline curse has been completely removed." Relics of Mr. Dor. Relics. Dorian ruminated over the words and opened his eyes, casting his gaze at the high sequence beyond a characteristic. He looked down silently, his vision gradually blurring. East Chester County, the Hall family manor. Alfred and the others, who had just figured out the source of the explosion and the enemy attack, shouted, saw the doors and windows open again at the same time, and they crashed into the walls. KK. During this process, several pieces of glass shattered. There is indeed something abnormal. Alfred raised his hand in a solemn expression. He said to an adjusted squire, personal guard, his bodyguard, retreated back to the main house and prevent any accidents that might happen next. At the same time, send a telegraph to the Archbishop of East Chester Diocese and request for assistance. He felt that the most important thing right now was not to investigate the abnormality, but to protect his father, mother, and sister. He had plenty of time to do the former after daybreak, but if anything happened to the latter, it would be impossible to make it up to him. After returning to the manor's main house and arranging for strict patrols, Alfred walked to the living room and said to Earl Hall, "There is indeed something abnormal, but the guards couldn't describe what he saw. He only felt extreme fear in that moment." Earl Hall nodded calmly and said, "We'll do further investigations after daybreak. Sit down and get some rest." Beside him, Audrey was holding her mother's arms, quietly listening to their father and two brothers talking. Of course, this was only an image. She had been continuously releasing virtual personas in an attempt to find the reason for a sudden opening of doors and windows from the memories of eyewitnesses. After a few minutes, she ended the investigation. Somewhat disappointed for the time being, she temporarily attributed it to the influence left behind by the mind dragon Airhog and Mr. Wrath. At that moment, she realized that the golden retriever Susie and the strange look in her eyes, she quickly sent out a virtual persona and entered the mind island of the other party's soul to have a private conversation. What did he discover? Audrey asked directly on Susie's mind island, and a voice resounded. "I smell a thick scent of blood. At the edge of the manor. It happened sometimes before the doors and windows opened. Yes, it happened about 10 seconds after the explosion." After hearing that, Audrey pursed her lips and fell silent for a few seconds. "Go take a look." Susie immediately stood up and tiptoed out of the living room. She left the manor's main house and the side door on the first floor. During this process, there would be people looking at her from time to time, but they didn't mind her and didn't attempt to stop her. After all, she was just a dog who had mastered psychological invisibility. After walking the path of the furthest building from the manor's main house, Susie watched her nose close and open without windows before jumping in. Then she saw a bloody corpse on the bed. Its skin had shed, and what she saw was equivalent to Audrey seeing it through visual persona, and she planted in her mind island. In the living room inside the main house of the manor, Audrey, who was holding her mother's arm, lowered her head. Then she lifted her head, and her eyes swept slowly and deeply across her family's faces. Earl Hall, Lady Caitlin, Hibbert, and Alfred. She maintained her silence, becoming increasingly silent. Bayham, inside the Cathedral of Waves. Alger, who was wearing a robe embroidered in the storm symbol, walked out from underground area. One step at a time, he nodded to the mandated punishers and priests who were waiting to the sides. The seals are restored to normal this time. You can return the items under your watch. Yes, Your Eminence. The mandated punishers, priests, and bishops heaved a sigh of relief as they struck their left chests with their right fists. Alger did the same. Anything else as he responded with the same salute. After returning to his room, he slowly looked around. He took a deep breath and found a seat to sit. The fool that doesn't belong to this era. Alger silently prayed to Mr. Fool, expressing his thoughts and preparing to leave the Church of Storm. This explanation that the seal was restored to normal in time could only convince relatively low-level members of the church. It was impossible to hide from any cardinal or high-ranking deacon, much less a pontiff and a lord of storms. And if he didn't get Mr. Fool's approval and protection, Alger didn't dare leave the Church of Storm so casually. He would definitely suffer the wrath of a god. A few seconds later, he saw the familiar boundless gray fog and heard Mr. Fool's reply. Okay. Go to the Church of the Sea God. Phew. Alger relaxed, stood up, and took off his storm robe. After changing into a linen shirt, brown jacket, and pantaloons, Alger looked at the cardinal robe on the table and fell silent for a while. Then he reached out of folded the robe neatly, and carefully examined it for a few seconds. Alger attracted his gaze and flew out of the cathedral through the open board window and controlled the strong wind. He first flew to the bell tower and landed at the top. He looked down at the surrounding streets and down at Bayham. During this process, Alger stepped on the edge of the roof and slowly circled it. Finally, he closed his eyes. A hurricane suddenly stirred as it swept Alger towards the Church of the Sea God. In an ancient palace above the grey fog, Klein silently sat on a high-backed chair belonging to the Fool. His figure would occasionally turn incorporeal, as though he was wearing a mysterious and classical black robe. Sorry, I'm going. During such intense, he wore a hood that made his face indiscernible. At other times, he would return to normal. However, he was enveloped by faint gray fog. The frequency of the change gradually slowed down, and every time Klein transformed into a black-robed, hooded figure, slippery tentacles and strange patterns growing would extend out from under his clothes. These nearly transparent tentacles flailed about, striking everywhere as if it was the palace for itself. And, after a while, Klein's figure finally stabilized. Out of habit, he raised his right hand and rubbed his temples as he muttered to himself. The awakening of the celestial worthy's will is faster and more intense than I expected. If I hadn't devoured Zertil's bionic characteristic and used the remnant material imprinted in the balance and stalled for time, I would have been able to adjust my state and stop him from awakening. However, this made Klein's mental state rather unstable. And he didn't lose control because his miracle invoker potion had already been completely digested, and the new attendant of mystery's bionic characteristic had been consumed, mostly digested, shortly after consumption. The identity of the world was blessed of the owner of Sepher Castle, making it directly equivalent to the attendant of mysteries. Therefore, Klein had already acted the role of attendant of mysteries for a very, very long time, and it had been quite successful. Damn. As for the second attendant of mysteries beyond a characteristic, he still needs some time to digest it. Just struggling. Just fully struggling. After stabilizing his anchors and the will of the celestial worthy and the weak balance of his consciousness, Klein leaned back in his chair and observed the various powers brought about by the attendant of mysteries beyond a characteristic. Among them were three most important ones. They were all grasped by Klein using Sepher Castle and the curtain ahead of time, but he just didn't know the exact names. The first was regenerate. If the materials that had made up for an old item once had a spirit body, then the attendant of mysteries could use the power of regenerate to summon the corresponding spirit body threads, making the item become his marionette. Then he could establish a deep connection with the item and also naturally transform into a marionette. To put it simply, an attendant of mysteries couldn't allow something that didn't have spirit body threads to produce spirit body threads. But he could also allow some items to regenerate their spirit body threads that had long disappeared. The former represented metallic items, gold coins, gold pounds, and so on. The latter mainly consisted of beef, fish, and other food. Once humans ate food, they were marionettes. They would also transform into marionettes, as though they had encountered intense corruption. The second was reassemble, which was also known as tampering. It could reassemble many physical objects or abstract concepts into something different, resulting in an unbelievable effect. It was like changing the definition, logic, orientation, or rules. The third was realm of mysteries. This was an ability used to create the embryonic form of a divine kingdom. It could bring about a certain concealment effect. Reassembly represents the authority of change, while Realm of Mysteries represents concealment. The two essential elements of full symbol are in place. However, reassembly and tampering doesn't sound nice, so the meaning isn't clear enough. Grafting is still better. It's obvious at a glance. Klein mumbled inwardly before casting his gaze around. Now he had deepened his control of Zephyr Castle. He could directly borrow the powers nearing Sequence 0 of the Seer Pathway. He could use the most beyonder powers below Sequence 0, the Marauder, and Apprentice Pathway. It was quite similar to the Dark Angel Sasori from back then. Of course, Dark Angel Sasori could only use the first Blasphemy Slate to indirectly use the powers of the Chaos Sea. As for Klein, he was the owner of Zephyr Castle, one that hadn't fully gained control of the Sephra, therefore his level was higher than Dark Angel Sasori's. As for strength, in theory he was stronger, but his strength was affected by too many factors, only having become a Beyonder after a few years. Klein can guarantee that he would definitely be able to defeat Heaven's deputy and left hand of God. In short, he was now considered a king of the kings of angels, and he was very close to the level of a true god. After gaining a deeper grasp of Zephyr Castle, the difference between me in here and the outside world is almost gone. It wouldn't result in me being a king of angels outside, but having the power of a true god in Zephyr Castle. The greatest advantage here is that it provides me the defense barrier, and even a true god can't break. Yes, whether the outer deities can do it remains to be seen. Klein slowly exhaled as he focused his attention on the current situation. There were two things he was most worried about at present. The first was the primordial moon, which was also the mother goddess of depravity. Although she failed to fully descend to the real world, and Mr. Door's return, a little portion of her strength was invaded. Furthermore, she maintained it for a few seconds under the attacks of 5 orthodox deities of Evernight, Steam, and Company. Whether this would affect the surroundings and corresponding pathways and exert certain effects on some matters remains to be seen. Second, Angel of Time Amon has already stolen Mr. Door's ritual and become a sequencer of the Marauder Pathway. He would be Klein's most direct and most powerful enemy. I wonder if Amon has taken the opportunity to accommodate Mr. Door's uniqueness in Sequence 1 Key of Stars. If he has completed this step, he will be the most powerful true god in the world. I wonder how he compares to the Evernight Goddess. No one knows how much of the death of the god of combat uniqueness and goddess has accommodated. Typically speaking, Amon shouldn't have the time to accommodate the Apprentice Pathway's uniqueness. Although Mr. Door's return is equivalent to the ritual itself, the most important matter at the moment was to replace Mr. Door, allowing the 3 Sequence 1 Beyonder characteristics and the uniqueness of the Marauder Pathway to gather together, resulting in a qualitative change. There's no time to accommodate the uniqueness of the Apprentice Pathway. Also, the operation has a high chance of awakening the Celestial Worthy. Amon wouldn't take such a risk. In other words, Amon's subsequent focus is to accommodate the uniqueness of the Apprentice Pathway and become a true god of 2 pathways. Otherwise, under the watch of the other 2 deities, it would be very difficult for him to finish off the King of Angels like me. Furthermore, if he does take the risk and succeeds, him having accommodated the Apprentice Pathway's uniqueness means that he has slowly adapted and stabilized his condition, making it impossible to deal with me in a short period of time. I have to make use of the time to become the fool. Only by doing so can I use Zephyr Castle and my own level to resist Amon. I don't have much time left. Klein silently gave a self-deprecating comment. He leaned forward and gently tapped the edge of the long molten table. He was analyzing the possibility of him becoming the fool in a short period of time. The digestion of the Attendant of Mysteries potion was relatively simple. By the time Klein used his anchor and consciousness to suppress the awakening of the Celestial Worthy of Heaven and Earth for blessings, and not lose control, or become someone else, he could use Zephyr Castle to create avatars like Amon. Then he could use the power of Zephyr Castle to steal the undigested Attendant of Mysteries beyond a characteristic he got from Zerto. At this point, Klein would immediately turn the avatar into a marionette, prevent any unexpected developments. This way, Klein would drop to the level of attendant of mysteries, who had fully digested the potion, and he would have the attendant mysteries marionette. This was one of the main ingredients of the potion, and the attendant of mysteries who had digested the potion was qualified to consume the fool's potion and become a sequencer or true god. These series of operations were too complicated, but it was too prone to mistakes. Furthermore, an ordinary dual sequence 1 King of Angels in the Seer pathway couldn't do it unless they have the sequence 2 Trojan Horse of Destiny friend of the Marauder pathway who's willing to sacrifice himself to provide help. Of course, the sequence 1 Worm of Time friend could do it. Friend. Therefore, to Klein, the most troublesome thing was that the other two matters. First, how to deal with the half-fool of the Antigonus family, and secondly, how to complete the ritual of fooling time, history, and faith. With my current level and strength, it's impossible to deal with the Antigonus family ancestor. Of course, the prerequisite is that I should familiarize myself with the corresponding Bionic characteristic and changes. Aw, thank you. Thank you. I noticed it the other day. I was like, damn, I can actually read these stories now. I was like, I'm almost done, and it only took me the rest of the book to be able to, like, read out loud. And, like, here's the other thing with it, too. Yes, I have dyslexia, and I, like, have trouble reading it, and just, like, reading it out loud helped. But I think another big thing that helped was I was, like, not only was I reading it out loud, but I was reading it out loud on camera for whoever wants to see it, which I think definitely improved my reading just by, like, necessity and need. Like, I had to improve my reading, which is good. Not saying that the cure to dyslexia is just reading, because I truly still have it. But it did make me more confident. The fool's ritual at all. Klein raised his hand and pinched his forehead, casting a gaze at the grayish-white fog behind Sephir Castle. Among time, history, and fate, he was undoubtedly more familiar with history. Now he could use Sephir Castle to directly influence the fog of history, allowing the corresponding powers of the seer pathway to become stronger or weaker. This is the embodiment of authority. Fooling history. Klein tapped the edge of the long molten table again as various thoughts flashed through his mind, but he repeatedly wrote them off. In his opinion, I know no one thought it, but I wanted to just, like, preface and be like, I don't think that, like, yeah. In his opinion, all the possible solutions didn't satisfy the requirements of fooling history. This was because history objectively recorded what had happened. Whatever happened was definitely responsible, and the solution that could satisfy the requirements, such as returning to the past, consuming the potion, and becoming the fool that came from history, wasn't able to achieve it. At the very least, Klein had never seen the ability to reserve time. My voice might sound a lot higher today. It's like, yeah, don't get me wrong, like, my voice was still cutting in and out, but I think it's doing okay right now. I don't sound like a boy going through puberty, or even worse, like a 50-year-old smoker. My voice isn't cracking, which is awesome. At the very least, Klein had never seen the ability to reverse time. As his gaze moved deep into the fog of history, Klein suddenly had a feasible idea. The present reality of history was this. The Tarot Club members believed that they were following the Fool that didn't belong to this era, an awakened ancient god, or an existence that surpassed the ancient god. In fact, the Fool was originally just an ordinary person hanging above the grey fog. He used all sorts of resources to package himself and improve himself. Klein's thoughts were inspired by Amon. He could use Sephir Castle to create an avatar and let the avatar use Sephir Castle to seal his fate consciousness. Anchors and Zertal's sequence 1 attendant and mysteries beyond a characteristic. Therefore, the main body of beyond a characteristic was formed purely from the one inside the curtain. in which the celestial worthy of heaven and earth for blessings was slowly awakening in. This was the understanding that the Tarot Club members was correct. Mr. Fool was a great existence. That was awakening. This went against the true history, but it was a fact grounded in reality. It could fulfill the requirements of the ritual. Of course, the premise was that the act of sealing an avatar needed to happen in Zephyr Castle or other concealed areas. Otherwise, it would also be recorded in history, preventing it from achieving the effects of the fooling. As for how he was to deal with the celestial worthy of heaven and earth for blessings, and how he awakened... Where's my charger? Because my computer's about to die. And I'm like, that'd be awkward. Because I can't fix that. Got it. Perfect. Shook his head and threw the incredible plan back in his mind. Under the circumstances where he could think of the solution, he decided to seek advice from the existences he might know to do so. He had two targets. One was the Saint of Fate, Will Auceptin, and the other was the Ebonite Goddess. The former might have some thoughts about fooling Fate, while the latter probably knew what kind of ritual the ancestor of the Antigonus family used to accommodate the uniqueness. After stabilizing his mental state, Klein left Zephyr Castle and directly teleported to Backland. Truly love the Evernight Goddess. I feel like this is a really aggressive start. Dude, the lag's gonna be back so bad. Honestly, I actually don't give a fuck about changing music if it's gonna lag, because we have a lot of chapters to do, so this might be it. Deep in the forsaken land of the gods, in the peak of the mountain stood a gigantic cross that bordered the realm of reality and illusion. There's a blurry figure hanging there. Accident wooden stakes dyed with fresh blood that didn't drip down passed through his body, nailing him to the cross. At the bottom of the cross was an angel of fate, Ouroboros, who was wearing a simple linen robe and had silver hair that reached his waist. He sat there cross-legged with gentle and pious expressions as he closed his eyes and prayed. Adam, whose face was half covered by a pale blonde beard, walked over and stopped in front of the huge cross. He raised his head and slightly looked at the hanging figure. He held a rose in one hand and held the second blasphemy slate in the other. His eyes were limpid and his expression was calm. After an unknown period of time, the image of the hangman and the huge cross suddenly faded away. Connecting to the sky and the land below, the shadow curtain behind the curtain seemed to be a pair of cold eyes watching over the world. In the next second, the rift appeared and the shadow curtain was dark inside, finally reverberating with an illusory tidal wave. Adam raised his left hand and let the ancient and mysterious magic mirror emit a faint glow. In the light, a sticky but illusory black liquid surged out the boundless sea and seemed to contain all colors appeared. It looked like it was an arm's length but couldn't affect reality. Following that, Adam placed the second blasphemy slate into the illusory scene. The illusory sea scene in the distance ebbed gently as it circled a second blasphemy slate, forming a certain connection with it. I'll always say it, I'm sorry. The illusory sea scene in the distance ebbed gently as it circled to a second blasphemy slate, forming a certain connection with it. The second blasphemy slate was a manifestation of the corpse of the ancient sun god, one which was extremely close to being a great old one and almost equivalent to the owner of the Chaos Sea. Upon seeing this scene, Adam's left hand moved slightly, allowing the rose to fly up and fall towards the angel of the fate, Ouroboros, under the huge cross. The second blasphemy slate and he held underwater some subtle changes, as though the rift of the curtains he walked inside. The shadow curtain closed and quickly faded again, leaving behind a huge, empty cross. No one said a word through the entire process. Everything was carried by slightly. Angel Fate Ouroboros didn't even attempt to open his eyes. At the same time, Amon became a god and used the first flashing slate to block the tunnel that the mother goddess of depravity was trying to enter through. The Lord of Storms finally smote apart the corpse cathedral that Adam had envisioned out of the north, nothing, and one of Adam's identities. After a while, Tail Devourer Ouroboros opened his eyes and cast his gaze at a rose which had landed on his lap. On the surface of the mirror, silver words appeared in swirling illusory water. You should know the feeling of piously believing and following a great existence, right? Ouroboros nodded indifferently. So can you send me back to my lord? On the surface of the mirror, silver words squirmed and formed a new sentence. Once you answer, you can ask me 2 questions. Ouroboros silently looked at the ancient mirror in silence for a long time. Finally, Rhodes couldn't help but produce a new question. Why aren't you answering? Ouroboros looked at himself in the mirror and replied calmly, I haven't thought it through yet. 3 questions. On the surface of the magic mirror, the silver light slowly outlined 2 words. In Backland, a long that belonged to a bungalow, Will Auceptin was already over 2 years old. Oh my god! Will Auceptin! Will Auceptin is so old now. I love that. He's in his terrible 2s. He had already over 2 years old, was happily chasing a fat golden cat in glistening fur. Beside him was a nanny and a maid. Bro, Will Auceptin is living the good life. He is living the good life. He's like, if I have to be a baby, I'm gonna be a well taken care of baby. Ever since the Snake of Fate was born, Aaron Sarah's career has improved by the day. Now he owned a private hospital, provided medical services to high society. As he ran, Will Auceptin stepped on the spot where he was slippery with a slip. His body involuntarily leaned back. He took a few steps back and stepped on another rock. This provided the impetus to stop Will Auceptin's fall, miraculously allowing him to maintain his balance. In regard to the encounter, alarms started ringing in his chubby toddler head. This was because, with his luck, it was impossible for him to step on the spot that could make people slip. A familiar figure appeared in his eyes. It was Sherlock Moriarty, wearing a half-top hat and a black double-breasted coat. Will Auceptin turned his head abruptly and looked at his nanny and maid. He discovered that they hadn't noticed the appearance of the stranger on the lawn. I have a nagging feeling that you would say, go ahead and scream, no one will hear you. The 2-year-old toddler mumbled as he turned around. Without waiting for Klein's reply, he spread his hands and said, in short, I must congratulate you on becoming a king of angels. Bullying children doesn't suit your current status. Klein let out a soft chuckle. Do you know how to fool fate? Will Auceptin raised his head and looked warily at Klein. Give me fake ice cream as an equivalent to fooling fate. With that said, he grumbled. Why don't you squat down? At my age, it'll be bad for my next development if I have to keep raising my head like this. Klein didn't have an air of a newly advancing king of angels. He squatted down with a smile, allowing Will Auceptin to look him straight in his eyes. Will Auceptin held his nanny's hand and said, unless I've advanced to a sequence here and become a wheel of fortune, fooling me in any form doesn't count as fooling fate. Klein thought and asked, you haven't found the opportunity to accommodate the die probability? No. Will Auceptin shook his head before adding, I have a premonition that it's coming soon. Klein carefully looked at the chubby 2-year-old toddler for a few seconds before suddenly smiling. If I were to give you the die of probability to Ouroboros, would he quickly advance to sequence 0? Will Auceptin glared at Klein and said, he will also need to wait for an opportunity to accommodate it. Furthermore, the opportunity to become a Wheel of Fortune and requirement accommodation of the die probability isn't the same. As he spoke, Will Auceptin curled his lips. If you wish to accommodate the fool's uniqueness, the corresponding ritual can be simplified. It won't be that difficult. In such a situation, by ingeniously using the abilities of the Trojan horse and destiny to make the sacrifice to a certain degree, there's a high chance of fooling fate. However, when you attempt to advance to sequence 0, even if you accommodate the uniqueness and absorb the 3 sequence 1 bionic characteristics on separate occasions, you will still have to hold the ritual, allowing the corresponding items to fuse and undergo qualitative change. Is that so? In other words, choosing a first accommodate the or uniqueness is just a trick, but in the end, I have to truly fool time, history, and fate. Klein nodded slightly and said, I roughly understand. He smiled and added, "Enjoy your childhood. I wonder how long it will last." Okay. With that said, Klein's figure turned transparent and vanished from the lawn. Klein is getting very ballsy. Like, I know he's like a king of angels, and I know he's super strong, but like, he's not. That's what I'm saying. Like, I'm just like the way he went up to Auceptin, and like, I get it's Auceptin, like he's like over 1,000-year-old being, but I'm like, we go up, kind of scary. Like, it's just your shadow. You're just kind of there. You leave with a threat. I'm wondering if it's maybe just the way I read it, but the way I read it is the way I pictured that whole interaction. Like, it was Auceptin getting annoyed and being like, "Hey, what the fuck are you on right now?" And Klein just kind of poking the bear a little bit. Here's the thing. Here's one thing that I noticed. The further Klein advances, the more he acts like Amon. Ever since he got kidnapped by Amon, he's been acting like him. It happens in like little pockets. It happens in certain times. It's very like, it's very small moments, but he does do it to people, and it'll have a very like Amon-esque vibe to it. And I've noticed it like as he kind of goes, and that's why I think it's like so. I don't know if this is kind of the route it's taking, but I think it would be so interesting, and I said this in my review, is like the only person who can really understand Klein is Amon. And that's also his greatest enemy. Like, that's also the person that he has to go up against. But like, I think that's just so interesting, and I also wonder if maybe that's why he starts to act like him a little bit, because he sees a bit of himself in Amon, so you're gonna kind of copy someone that you can relate to in like a very weird and fucked up way. I don't know. That's just my thought on it. Northborough and Backland St. Samuel Cathedral. Klein, who had transformed into Dwayne Dantes, walked into a prayer hall and found the corner to sit down. He looked at Evernight's sacred emblem on the altar, lowered his head, clasped his hands, and began to pray. The Evernight goddess, who stands higher than the cosmos and more eternal than eternity, you were also the mother of concealment, the empress of misfortune. To be super honest, I probably will not be changing the songs. It just glitches too much. So I'll probably just leave it. Unless it's like a really important song switch. I'm just gonna leave it because I don't want to fuck with it. And that's what I'm saying. I could be on to nothing. But I don't know. I think if I ever meet Cuttlefish, I'll ask if there was a point to that. And if I was maybe onto something with it. You were also the mother of concealment, the empress of misfortune and horror. As he prayed, Klein's body and mind gradually settled down as though he had entered a half-awake state. Yeah, it's fine. After an unknown period of time, the boundless darkness appeared in front of him. Besides his feet was a clump of night vanilla and slumber flowers. This place was so quiet, and even breathing seemed to disturb those slumbering around him. Before Klein could survey his surroundings, a figure suddenly descended from the depths of the darkness. There was clearly no sky or land here, but the figure seemed to come from a crimson moon or the stars in the sky. She was wearing a long, layered black dress, and didn't seem complicated at all. It was adorned with countless resplendent lights, and, though the starry night sky had been draped upon it, her head was indistinct and difficult to discern. He could only confirm that it was female. "Long time no see," the figure said gently before Klein spoke. Her voice was like a lullaby. Klein bowed gentlemanly manner and said, "Is this direct? At the former Lord of Mysteries, or me, who was previously hung above Separate Castle?" Klein was very certain that this was a dream, but a dream didn't mean that it was fake. The Evernight Goddess's projection said with a smile, "I'm not sure where you were hanging above that door of light. After I left, I never went back again." Indeed. Klein sighed inwardly. From the details, he confirmed the origins of Evernight Goddess and Manesis. The 3 cocoons of light that tore open were side by side, he repeated simply. The Evernight Goddess's projection was silently floating in the darkness, giving off a surreal feeling. She said softly, "The people there were all candidates meant for the Lord of Mystery's revival, but due to some unknown incident, he lost control of many things. If it wasn't for that, I would have died long ago and lived with the identity of the Lord of Mysteries. Then you and Roselle wouldn't have had the chance to return to reality. This means that the death of the celestial worthy is more thorough. He can only rely on the will left inside the beyond characteristics and the mechanical arrangements of Zephyr Castle to revive." Klein sighed and smiled. "I can already hear him whispering into my ears." You know what? I'm good with it. I'm super good to have nothing to objectify. Saves me a lot of hassle. The Tonight Goddess's projection calmly said, "For him, or them, we are unable to defeat or stop them. All we can do is resist and suppress them. Perhaps at certain times a tiny oversight, or relaxing even the slightest will, turns into him. On the path of being a Beyonder, danger is always accompanying us. No one knows when we'll fall for the abyss." Klein silently added a few words to the Evernight Goddess. He thought for a moment and asked, "Did you cause some sort of disturbance when I was born?" Seemingly fused with the surroundings, the Evernight Goddess nodded slightly. "I used the uniqueness of Antigonus to indirectly affect Zephyr Castle to tamper the Beyonder characteristics that accompanied your birth to the forsaken land of the gods." Indeed. Klein sighed and frowned. "The uniqueness of Antigonus can indirectly influence Zephyr Castle?" The Evernight Goddess projection replied gently, like a lullaby. "He has already lost control. This also means that his self-awareness is no longer able to suppress the Lord of Mystery's will in him. The two psyches are stitched together, revealing the most primitive, most instinctual, and most bloody and crazy side. And the Lord of Mysteries is former owner of Zephyr Castle. The present Antigonus can indirectly influence Zephyr Castle by using this identities very naturally. There's no wonder the Evernight Goddess has a greater understanding of the strange door of light than Emperor Roselle. On the other hand, she was born from Zephyr Castle. On the one hand, she was born from Zephyr Castle, and on the other hand, she had imprisoned the crazy Antigonus." Klein was enlightened as he continued asking, "Why didn't you have any Beyonder characteristics accompanying you and Roselle when both of you were born?" In that case, be it the Evernight Goddess or Emperor Roselle, they definitely would have chosen one of the seer, apprentice, or martyr pathways. The Evernight Goddess's projection said indifferently, "This is also why I said that something unknown had to happen to the Lord of Mysteries, causing many of the prior arrangements to be out of control. After 2 consecutive failures, Zephyr Castle has experienced a certain change. This is also a good thing for you. As the apocalypse arrives, the remnants will of the Lord of Mysteries has dissipated. In the end, all that is left is mental imprint that's attempting to wake up. If you were born in the 4th epoch, you would have become him, the moment you become an attendant of mysteries." This was because Klein had used the curtain left behind by the celestial worthy during the advancement. As for the Beyonder characteristics in the bodies of Antigonus and Zertil, they had undergone generations of Beyonders and Beyonder creatures, diluting the wearing of the will. Klein had a nagging feeling that the Evernight Goddess had some guesses about what had happened to the celestial worthy of heaven and earth for blessings. However, since she deliberately didn't mention it, it wasn't appropriate for him to probe further. All he could do was say, "How did Antigonus manage to accommodate the fool's uniqueness?" The Evernight Goddess' dream projection didn't hide anything as she replied gently, "He sought the help of Adam and Amon. They were supporting a listed tutor back then. Using the abilities of the Trojan..." Yeah, I guess this a while ago. Using the abilities of the Trojan Horse of Destiny, Klein acutely grasped the core reason behind Auceptin's explanation for interference. The Evernight Goddess projection was like the starry sky and night quality comforting her surroundings. They captured the demigod from the Solomon Empire and got Adam to do a deeper level hypnotism act and it transparent to the corresponding memories. making him believe that it was Antigonus. Then, with Amon working with Antigonus, he stole Antigonus's identity and fate, while Antigonus used the tampering authority to combine the identity and fate with the experimental subject. That demigod from the Solomon Empire began living in the state of Antigonus, and after some time, he took the initiative to accommodate the fool's uniqueness. He undoubtedly lost control. At this moment, the real Antigonus removed the tampering, allowing his identity and fate to return into Amon's hands. Amon ended the theft and returned them to the original owner. Klein listened attentively and asked thoughtfully. If that's the case, it's equivalent to Antigonus falling to accommodate the uniqueness and turning into a monster, and a perfectly well Antigonus with no problems at all. The two completely different fates existed in the real world at the same time, therefore fate has been fooled to a certain extent. Before he finished his sentence, Klein sensed some latent problems and hurriedly asked, "Aren't there problems with this?" "It's very risky." The Evernight Goddess's dream projection calmly replied, "Fate isn't easy to bear. If one can't retrieve the fate from the target in the short period of time while he's losing control, things will undoubtedly fail. Retrieving a second earlier will not achieve the effect of the ritual. Retrieving a second later will lead to the Antigonus shouldering the fate of losing control and inevitably end up with the same outcome." "That's right. One has to naturally bear the burden of the troubles brought about by fate." Aw, thank you! That's so sweet of you! Aw. The amount of comments I have gotten being like, I can see how much you've improved. Thank you. Thank you so much. I feel like, here's the thing. I love Lord of the Mysteries. I will always love Lord of the Mysteries. Truly. I'm so excited to read, OVR and also ORV, Orv, and also Koi, and just all the other ones. Because I'm like, my ability to read has just gotten so much better. But thank you. I appreciate it. I also dicked around so much while I was reading volume 3 and 4, and I kind of started to lock in for like volume 5 and 6, and obviously like 7 and 8 were good, but like when I was doing like volume 3, no, it did not need to take me that long. Will not achieve the effect of the rituals. Retrieving a second later will lead to Antigonus shouldering the fate of losing control and inevitably end up with the same outcome. That's right, one has to naturally bear the burden of troubles brought by the fate. If not for that, Amon would have long stolen my fate and swaggered into Sephra Castle. Klein mumbled inwardly as he began to think about how he should imitate the ritual of Antigonus' family ancestors. It was difficult to complete the normal ritual, and with the urgency of the matter, using the simplified ritual to accommodate the full uniqueness was the best option. Once I become the half-fool, my control over Sephra Castle will improve. My level of strength will at least reach the level of True God. This way, even if I face a dual pathway, True God like Amon, I'll be able to protect myself and wait for the reinforcements, even if I'm not a match for him. As Klein thought about the strength, matchup, and development he hoped for, he began coming up with a preliminary ritual plan. He planned on using the Evernight Goddess's help to suppress the Antigonus family ancestors and use Sephra Castle to steal his identity, fate, and self-awareness. This way his body would have his own consciousness and the will of celestial worthy. Antigonus' ancestors' self-awareness, as well as the anchors of the new City of Silver, New Moon City in the Rorst Archipelago, he would also become Antigonus to a certain extent and accept his fate of losing control and going mad. The reason why Antigonus went crazy was that his self-awareness could no longer suppress the awakening of the celestial worthy. The two psyches were stitched together, and when his self-awareness reached Klein's body, he would undoubtedly repeat the same process. This was because the celestial worthy's will in Klein's body was no less than one in his actual body. In other words, the fate of losing control of madness was unavoidable. Klein believed that there would be any additional burden when bearing it. At the same time, with him having more anchors than Antigonus in his own consciousness, could remain certain center stage and in a harmonious state, maintaining the sliver of rationality. In such a state, he would use the identity of the Antigonus family's ancestors to accommodate the fool's uniqueness, and in a corresponding fate, This was something that he had long accommodated, so it wouldn't bring about any further repercussions. Hence, fate had been fooled. After the ritual ended, Klein would remove his theft and restore his original identity and fate, and no longer be affected by the madness, allowing him to become the half-fool. The main problem in this plan was in two places. First, it was to maintain his own state. Any slight accident could easily cause Klein to go crazy and be powerless to save himself. Second, no one knew for sure how much this celestial worthy's will in the body of the Antigonus family ancestors would awaken or bring about unsuppressed changes. He could only rely on Evernight Goddess to balance it out. At this moment, the Evernight Goddess's projection seemed to have guessed his thoughts. If you wish to steal the fate of Antigonus, it's best to let him enter a temporary state of eternal slumber. I can try to help you, but I need a medium to have the necessary competence. This is an angel that had accommodated the fool's uniqueness. What medium? Klein asked, seemingly in thought. The Evernight Goddess's projection said with a smile, the river water of the river of eternal darkness. As expected. To Klein, this answer wasn't surprising at all. It was even within his expectations. This made him feel rooted to the ground. He deliberated for a moment and said, just the river water? The Evernight Goddess's projection nodded slightly and said, you won't be able to take away the entire river of eternal darkness at the moment. You'll understand once you reach the depths of Calderon City. You can ask the questions when you are back. Without waiting for Klein's answer, she added, for you, there is an unusual danger there. You better wait until your mental state is stable before you go. All right. Although Klein didn't know what he would do encountering the depths of Calderon City, he knew that he wasn't in the right state of task to risk, especially when it involved Saffron. The Evernight Goddess's projection continued. When you awake, hold a bestowment ritual. I will give you an item that can be used to scoop up the river water of the eternal darkness. Klein nodded and said with a word, Adam is part of the ancient sun god. One of his identities? The Evernight Goddess's projection didn't show any obvious signs of motion. She gently said, he has already gone to the forsaken land of the gods and met the true creator. That's fast. After feeling a little surprised, Klein felt that it was only right. The reason why Adam allowed the secret to be exposed was that the secret was no longer of value. The Evernight Goddess projection continued. No matter what happens next, it will take a long period of time. You don't have to pay attention to it for now. After Klein nodded, a figure in front of him quickly turned blurry. The night vanilla and slumber flowers under his feet flew up one by one, scattering throughout the darkness. He opened his eyes and saw the dark hall and the pure light shining through the holes in the wall. The latter were like stars embedded into the velvet night sky. Bro! Loving Evernight Goddess. First time we met her, pleasantly surprised. Not pleasantly surprised. Pleasantly just, like, satisfied. Yeah. Oh, perfect. Yes. That's the thing, is, like, I'm excited to read Orv because I feel like there's a lot of people who haven't read it, so we can read it together, which will be good. Have fun watching the volume 4. I feel like I lock in a little bit more during volume 4. It's not as much of a mess. After about halfway. Chapter 1359, Early Morning. Klein watched the scarlet flames suddenly appear and engulf him. When the sparks scattered, his figure had already vanished from St. Samuel Cathedral. In an ordinary inn's room, Klein walked out in suddenly raising flames and began settling up a bestowment ritual. I know, I'm so close. I'm so close! In an ordinary inn's empty room, Klein walked out of the suddenly... There. Setting up a bestowment ritual. Soon the mysterious door formed, a candlelight opened, and an ancient accessory flew out from the endless darkness and landed on the altar. The accessory seemed to be made out of gold. It looked like a slender bird surrounded by a pair of wings. Formed by white flames, the bronze eyes shimmered with layers of light as though they were illusory doors hidden within. Klein sincerely thanked the Evernight goddess. Truly. Yeah. Yes, so it's this stream, and then there's one tomorrow, and then the last one's on Sunday. June 28th. Klein sincerely thanked the Evernight goddess, ended the ritual, and picked up the golden bird-shaped accessory. This seemed to be an image of the legendary phoenix ancestor Greygrace. Beyond this ancient death-zone pathway, she had apparently grasped partial authority of the apprentice pathway. This is a preliminary conclusion for the city ruins of the Forsaken Land of the gods that believed in the phoenix. It's no wonder most ancient gods find it difficult to control their emotions. They were on the edge of madness. No, they were constantly teetering between madness and rationality. Before the first blasphemy slate appeared, none of the Beyonder creatures had the concept of sequence pathways. They only had the concept of convergence, reproduction, and blind attempts. As Klein carefully examined the golden bird-shaped accessory, he sighed inwardly. As the owner of Suffolk Castle, he could sense that there were subtle connections between the accessories and the river of eternal darkness. So I can control the river waters. Yes, the river water of the eternal darkness is definitely not river water in the true sense of the phrase, but an abstract concept or symbol. I think it's just ironic that the last stream of Volume 1 is going to be on June 28th. Sealing it in the junk pile to prevent any unnecessary accidents. On the mountain peak outside Bayham City, the Red Angel Evil Spirit watched as the edge of the sea gradually lit up and the orange sun slowly left the horizon. At some point in time, a young man wearing a pointed hat and classical black robe appeared beside him. The man played with a crystal monocle and wore it on his right eye. It was Amon, who had become Mr. Error. Sauron Enhorn Medici turned his head and glanced at Amon. The sacrifice you provided, actually the original body. If it wasn't my true body, how could I have the time to seal the ritual and replace Bethel? Amon replied with a smile. As a qualified conspirer, you should have not thought of this. The Red Angel Evil Spirit scoffed. How would I know that you were trying to trick me? Perhaps you'd predict my predictions. Amon smiled and didn't answer directly. Instead, he took out a strange crown covered in rust and blood. This is your reward. He threw the item at Sauron Enhorn Medici. After the Red Angel Evil Spirit caught the strange crown, he was somewhat surprised. You actually didn't try to go back on your word. Doing something that doesn't match your expectations is also a form of deception. Amon pinched his monocle in his right eye and said with a smile, I'm looking forward to you becoming the Red Priest and devouring that demoness. When that happens, your image will definitely be extremely interesting. As Amon said this, his smile carried an unconcealable sense of warped humor. Sauron Enhorn Medici fell silent for a moment before saying, I don't think it'll be very different from how I am now. Two bloody mouths opened on either side of his face, before quickly closing. Amon adjusted the monocle in his right eye and looked at the other side of the sea. The situation in the Western continent seems interesting. With that said, the present Mr. Error, the former Angel of Time, turned into light and dissipated. The Red Angel Evil Spirit looked at the direction of where Amon was looking at and tossed the strange crown in his hand. On both sides of his face, the bloody mouths appeared once again. They said, After absorbing this bionic characteristic, you better stay away from Banshee. If you wish to go breast and have your body swell up, you can continue staying there. Medici curled his lips and said, Isn't this something you both wish for? Facing the altar filled with materials and artifacts, Klein raised his right hand and snapped his fingers. The table in front of him instantly became empty and cleaned. All the junk had been split up in categories and returned to the original location. This was the miracle that stemmed from one of Klein's accumulated wishes. Compared to the past miracle invoker and attendant of mysteries, the miracles I can create can be described as quite varied. It's very practical, including but not limited to building houses, interior designs, garbage, classifications, and environmental projections. Klein looked at the cleared and laughed self-deprecatingly. Then he opened the door and left. He wanted to return to the real world, return to the human society to strengthen his humanity and stabilize his mental state. His problem now was relatively problematic. If he didn't directly sought out Miss Justice's treatment before suppressing the awakening will of the celestial worthy, he would only contaminate her and allow his psychiatrist to suffer mental illness. Of course, if Miss Justice had reached sequence 2, the effects wouldn't be too great. The current backland had been rebuilt, and the number of pedestrians coming and going had returned to their previous peak. Just as Klein pushed open the inn's doors, he heard all sorts of voices. "Wait! Wait! Fresh fish from Prince Harbor. It has plenty of meat and little bones. It's great for frying. Special ginger beer matched with muffins and potato wedges. Hot and fresh oyster soup. The freshest vegetables." Most of the noise came from the street vendors, and some came from the small number of passengers who were chasing the public carriage or pedestrians who were knocked down by people in a rush. The early morning rush painted such noisy, sonorous, and chaotic scenes. Klein listened to these unfamiliar yet familiar shouts and silently looked at the scene in front of him. He didn't move for a few minutes. Only when the thief came close did he put his hands into his black coat pockets and walk towards the nearest coffee shop. "A cup of good coffee and a set of mutton stew with peas, a piece of oatmeal bread," Klein said to the affordable coffee shop's owner. "Total of 11 pence, the boss said after a mental calculation. Then he added, "The price of everything is rising now." Klein didn't say anything. He took out one solly note from the junk pile in Suffolk Castle and handed it to the boss. He then found a seat by the window, which wasn't very greasy. He took out a few pieces of tissue and lined up the table. Allowing that, Klein placed the piece of paper on top of it and took out a dark red fountain pen. After watching the morning scenery and pedestrians, he finally wrote, "Dear Mr. Isaac, I haven't written to you for another month because I had no choice but to sleep for some time. This isn't because I'm hurt, but because the ritual requires it. When I woke up and walked into human society again on the streets, it suddenly reminded me of the life I had when I was in Tingen. At the time, it was always very noisy in the morning. A large number of citizens would leave their homes, rushing to the factories and companies. The mobile peddlers gathered on the street and peddled their vegetables, foods, and fruits of questionable quality. They were always cheap. I would always protect my wallet and carefully squeeze through before heading to the station and wait for the public carriage with many people. I worked at Backlund Thorne Company's security company at 36 Zuland Street and had a group of good colleagues. Dunn Smith was a captain, the supervisor there. He was an experienced, kind, and reasonable beyonder. He had a mild personality and was an experienced in his job. He also cared for all the members of the team. His only flaw was his bad memory. For matters which weren't too important, he might forget about it. The moment he turned around, he often said, "Hold on, there's still another thing." Of course, there was a reason why. He had lost too many companions. He hoped that they would all stay in his dreams, so he often became lost so as to which mattered in reality and which belonged to dreams. Oh, I'm gonna cry. Old Neil was my first mysticism teacher. The most useful skill he taught me was to expense claims. He always designed strange ritualistic magic, hoping to obtain the help from the goddess. Some of it succeeded, while others produced ridiculous accidents. Until today, I can still recall them. He was a very kind person. Even when he was seeking to fulfill his everlasting dream, he didn't wish to harm others. Leonard is a poet, with his own secrets. At first, I thought he was very mysterious. I had an expert that needed attention to be placed on him. Later, I realized that he was crude, simple, impulsive, rebellious, aloof, and a rude young man. Furthermore, he really doesn't have any literary talent, so he could only rely on memorizing things to complete the acting requirement. Yes, he barely has some merits. He's considered rather brave, and he has a sharp intuition and terrifying reasoning abilities to certain matters. However, this is limited to certain matters. Not him shitting on Leonard any chance he gets. Fry was a cold-looking beyonder who no one dared to approach, but in fact he had a sense of responsibility and a warm heart. He would always extend his hand when others needed help. Kenley was very short. He used to be a civil staff member, and he then took the initiative to apply to become an official member. He was quite smart, but he would never decline a case. Every time he played cards, he would talk about his fiancée. Roseanne is the receptionist at Blackthorn Security Company. She's lively and lazy, and she's loved by everyone. To us, she's like a younger sister. The way he's writing this is very interesting because it's not in past tense. And I don't know if that's meant, like if that's supposed to be not in past tense or if it was just a translation error, but nothing's written in past tense, which I think is very interesting at him writing this. She's like a younger sister. She also likes every single one of us, but she also hates all the official members because her father was once an official beyonder who later died in the course of duty. Perhaps, in her heart, official members were equivalent to people who received a notice that they were inflicted with critical illness. Miss Oriana is an accountant, a victim of supernatural case. She is delicate and gentle, and she pursues an exquisite life. She usually doesn't speak much, but she takes good care of everyone and doesn't make things difficult for us. This actually is really sad because this is not in past tense. Regarding finances. For example, she rarely reflects old Neil's expense claims. No matter how ridiculous the reason was, she only leave it to the Klein to make a decision. Ma'am Sika Tron has a rare natural white hair, and she's an unsuccessful author. She has an outstanding temperament and quite personality. She doesn't seem like a beyonder who fights at night. She's also very brave and very firm. Even when facing death, she doesn't flinch. Ma'am Royale is very simple to Frey. Is it Frey or Frey? I can't remember. Frey. They don't talk much, but they're very concerned about their colleagues. Yes, except at the card table. Brett is best at writing reports among the clerks. He's a romantic gentleman. Even though he's been married for 15 years, he still loves his wife very much. I think he'll live a good life because he lives by the maximum, and the less he knows, the longer he'll live. Cesare Francis is our carriage driver. Despite being a civil staff member, he often encounters dangerous situations. Therefore, the captain handed over the matters regarding the purchase of goods and applications to him. He doesn't make the presence known, and perhaps this is a key to his survival. I am very curious. I occasionally think about it. If it weren't for the things that happen later, I would definitely still be living in Tingen. I would work on time every day. I'll be on duty to man the basement and would deal with a few cases that crop up while playing cards with my colleagues. I would occasionally accompany Melissa and Benson to watch a play or circus show. If I can come home early one day, I'll start cooking. That's a huge hobby of mine. When the weekend comes, I might come to visit you and talk about the histories of various fields. It's a pity that life is always pushing us forward and making us face changes. Interesting. Interesting. Is Klein losing his memory? Not, oh my god, I have hair in my mouth. Not in the way that like Captain Dunn was losing his memory, but is Klein like forgetting, like, is he, here's the thing, I know he's writing to Mr. Azek so that when Azek wakes up, he can read these things, but I am just curious, the way in which Klein writes down these things to Azek, like that whole segment, that was very like present tense, as if he hadn't left not Backland, Tingen City. So like, I'm just wondering, is he doing this not only to write these down for Azek so he can read them when he wakes up, but also for Klein to not forget, like, as he develops to godhood and as all this goes on, for him not to forget kind of like the simplistic times and like where Klein came from and like the beginning of this journey. Yeah, like I get he's like probably like reminiscing on like that, but I'm wondering if there was like an ulterior motive to it as well, like slowly but surely he's just like slipping away, so he's trying to like hold on tight to this, and one of the ways he grounds himself is by writing these things in present tense, so it's like he's still there. Yeah. So I shouldn't say losing his memory, but like moving on kind of past it, you know? After Klein wrote down his impression of Tingen, he briefly mentioned that he had completed the ritual to become a Sequence 1 Attendant Mysteries. Yeah, that's what it was. It wasn't like I shouldn't have said he's forgetting losing his memories. It's like he's just trying to hold on to what it was. That's what it was. Yeah. I think it's cool. It's a very fitting stylistic choice to put it in present tense anytime Klein writes to Isaac or anytime Klein speaks about stuff in the past, to make it him not speak about it as if it was in the past. He didn't describe his predicament in details, only seriously discussing the mental problems and Angel suffered. Putting away the fountain pen and folding the paper, Klein reached out to take out Isaac's copper whistle from Sephra Castle and blew at it. Inside the cheap coffee shop, white bones spewed out like fountains, forming a huge messenger. The messenger that shrank his body, becoming only the height of a normal person. At the same time, he knelt down and on one knee and stretched out his palm. "There's no need to be afraid of me." Upon saying this, Klein laughed. "It's not like I would do anything to you." As he spoke, he picked up the letter and placed it on the skeleton's messenger hands. The messenger nodded heavily a few times. It was unknown what he was agreeing with. Then his body disintegrated, turning into bones with drilled into the ground. At this moment, the boss brought coffee, oatmeal bread, and mutton stew with peas. As Klein enjoyed breakfast and wasn't too delicious, but was filled with the bourgeois style, he looked at the window and enjoyed the morning scenery without any reason. He admired the pedestrians, carriages, trees, mist, food, machinery that make up the scene. If there was no apocalypse, it's best to be a Sequence 7 Beyonder to maintain the life in Tingen and live rather leisurely. While being capable of handling most cases, when prepared, a magician who has many tricks up his sleeve won't appear too weak for facing Sequence 6 and Sequence 5 Beyonders. For the faceless and marionettes, one can easily get lost while acting. It's relatively easy to lose control when one advances, making it rather dangerous. Of course, if one has a sealed Creeping Hunger, it would be perfect. Klein casually thought as he recalled Creeping Hunger, which had landed in Amon's hands. He didn't know how Amon would treat the sealed artifact, but he only felt that it was an item of this level was of no value of the Angel of Time. After playing for a while, he would properly throw it into a secret warehouse in the darkness. I wonder if there's a chance to retrieve it. Just as this thought flashed through Klein's mind, he suddenly felt a little guilty. This was because even if he could snatch Creeping Hunger back from Mon's hands, he would throw it into the junk pile, making it wait to be bestowed to the blessed or believers that needed it. This was no different from being in Mon's hands. Klein quickly diverted his attention. "I lost the mirror again. Adam should be interested in mirrors at the state level. Perhaps I can get it back." No road seems to have been spewed out from this Chaos Sea. In certain matters, it's possible for it to be a medium. I only hope that Amon doesn't damage it and that I can have time to retrieve it. After becoming an attendant of mysteries and gaining the deeper control of Sephra Castle, Klein had possessed a certain level of authority in concealment domain. Whenever he was thinking about important matters, there would always be a thin shadow around him that no one else could see. This is the equivalent of the ambiotic form of the divine kingdom of the realm of mysteries. Therefore, he dared to directly think of Adam's name. After sighing, Klein silently recalled something and hurriedly got to the worms of spirit on duty of Sephra Castle to graft a certain area of the spirit world he had fixed and advanced over. Immediately after he finished the leftover mutton and the last bit of oatmeal bread, he dipped into the soup. He finished the coffee beside him. No, honestly, free my boy, he ain't do nothing. After putting up his hat and standing up, Klein took a step forward and entered the spirit world that corresponded to Utopia. Then he removed the grafting and returned to the ruins of Utopia. This was use of ability of grafting and the ability to freely enter the spirit world and indirectly achieve a teleportation effect. Of course, the prerequisite was that he couldn't locate the corresponding region in the spirit world. On this point, as the owner of Sephra Castle, Klein had a unique advantage as for Zuratil and the other attendant mysteries. They could only rely on their preparations. As soon as they stepped into the ruins of Utopia, Klein surveyed the area and discovered that the collapsed houses and charred corpses were shimmering with different colors. They were the bionic characteristics inside the monsters' marionettes and wealth accumulated by Klein back in the Forsaken Land of the Gods. This might be used to him but he still had many believers of the blessed and would gradually increase the numbers as a deity. He had to stock up on bionic characteristics in order to bestow them. Thankfully, the Lord of Storms didn't take the opportunity to sweep them away. Klein silently muttered to himself he couldn't help but thank Leo Darrow. East Chester County, inside the Hall family manor. After the sun finally rose, the suffering people returned to their rooms, and one after another made way for their lack of sleep. Only Alfred, Earl Hall's personal bodyguards, and deacons, the Nighthawks, sent by the Church of Evernight to investigate the reason behind the incident last night, remained. As Audrey used the golden retriever Susie to monitor the developments of the situation, she opened her bedroom door and walked in. Through the curtain in the weak sunlight in the room, the figure sat up quietly on the high stool like a large doll. It was a huge snow-white rabbit. Audrey's brows twitched and whispered, "Mr. Wrath?" This was Mr. Wrath from the psychology alchemist that has pursued the mind dragon, Arrowhorg. It was suspected to be one of Hermes' identities. As she spoke, Audrey reached out her hand and closed the door. And with this action, the back of her hand flashed with the star-like crimson tattoo. "I'm sorry I made use of you." When the door closed, the giant white rabbit took the initiative to say, "However, I might have been used to someone else as well." Audrey thought of opening the door and windows in the middle of the night and took a step forward. She replied in thought, "There's no need to apologize, just don't disturb me in the future." She was tactfully expressing that she wanted to leave the psychology alchemist, hoping that no one would come looking for her again. The huge white rabbit stared at her with the bright red eyes for a few seconds and said, "Your previous wish was to protect your parents and family, but don't you think that you've been embroiled in too much trouble? The danger that you brought them is greater than the help you provide." Audrey fell silent. She didn't speak for a long time. Normally speaking, a saint can indeed allow the family to gain more safety, but the premise is that they do involve themselves in the struggle between angels or deities, or perhaps they are part of a powerful organization that can rely on this in true sense of the word. Upon saying this, a huge white rabbit slowly said, "I have 2 gifts to express my apology. You can choose one." "2?" Audrey asked in a low voice. The giant white rabbit nodded, its ears constantly wiggling. "One is to truly become Miss Pride of the Psychology Alchemist. We can ignore all your other secrets and tactically allow your other operations, as long as you don't reveal our matters and bring danger to the Psychology Alchemist. Of course, there will be certain disadvantage. You will shoulder the burden of certain matters and might be embroiled in quite a bit of trouble. The only difference is that you will receive a lot of help and be rescued in time." "What's the second one?" Audrey had no intention of getting compensation from the psychology alchemist. To not have the secret organization disturb her again was the best form of apology. Furthermore, the suspect of Mr. Wraith's true intentions behind his apology was just another form of exploitation. The huge white rabbit answered calmly, "I can help you divine another identity so that she can stay by your family and provide them with some protection. The emotional comfort for you will stay away from them and live on in this world with another identity. This way your troubles will not affect the people you want to protect. In this supernatural world, under the certain circumstances, distancing yourself is the best form of love and protection." Audrey fell silent once again, and her green eyes seemed like a still lake. "You don't need to answer me at once. Or you can combine the 2 methods." The giant king rabbit got off in the high stools and stood up. "You know how to get into the Garden of Eden." As it spoke, its figure gradually disappeared in the sea of collective subconsciousness. Bam! In a room in the Church of Sea God, the Oracle Donitz, dressed in the gorgeous robe, sat on the chair silently looking at Alger Wilson. The sleepiness from waking up in the middle of the night was gone from the fright. The Cardinal of the Church of Storms was actually one to defect from the Church of the Sea God. This was a huge matter in the field of religion, in the world of mysticism and international politics. Even though he only had a rough understanding of the Church of Storms, Donitz believed that with their style in handling matters, this definitely wouldn't let this matter go. Perhaps a calamity was already on its way to enter Vorsted Archipelago to destroy it. Furthermore, the Cardinal's definitely high value by the Lord of Storms. Alger's betrayal might attract the god's punishment at any time. The more Donitz thought about it, the more he trembled, afraid that he would be affected. This made him recall a saying in his hometown: "Don't be near people abandoned by the gods." This was because the guys might be implicated when lightning smote down. If not for the fact that Gammon Sparrow had sent me a message in the name of being Mr. Fool's attendant to help me settle Alger Wilson in, I would have already tied up the ticking time bomb and sent him back to the Church of Lord Storms. The more afraid of Don's was, the more he couldn't help but mutter inwardly. Of course, he was just letting his thoughts run wild. He didn't even consider the difference in strength. After a while, someone knocked on his door. Donus jumped up and quickly walked to the door, opening the crack. "Any results?" asked in a low voice. The intel supervisor of the Church of Sea God said simply, "Lord Oracle, the Church of Storms has switched cardinals." "What about the original one?" Donut pressed in surprise. "It said that he was transferred back to their headquarters." The intel supervisor recounted what he learned from some of the servants in the Cardinal of Waves. Transferred back to the headquarters. As Donitz was confused, the grayish-white fog suddenly appeared in front of him. He heard Mr. Fool's words. "From this day forth, Alger shall wear a mask and become a pontiff of the Church of Sea God." Oh my god. Fucking blow my head off. Don't piss me off. Pontiff? Donitz jumped in fright, nearly unable to believe the revelation he had received. If it wasn't for the fact that the order directly came from Mr. Fool, he would have definitely cursed. Of course, it was a person who upset him was Gammon Sparrow, so he would suck it up. "Lord Oracle, is there anything else?" The intel supervisor of the Church of the Sea God saw, and Lord Donitz's expression was rather odd. This left him a little afraid. Donitz... Did I put 2 P's? I did. Big time op. Yeah. Left him a little afraid. Donitz retracted his thoughts and forced a smile. "Pay close attention to the development of the Cathedral of Waves." "Yes, Lord Oracle." The intel supervisor heaved a sigh of relief and hurriedly bowed and bid farewell. Donitz turned his head and looked at Alger Wilson as he said with a brilliant smile, "Mr. Fool has already issued the revelation." Alger didn't hesitate. He immediately stood up and pressed his right palm against his left chest. Donitz straightened his back and solemnly said, "Good. Oh, God said that from this day forth, Alger shall wear a mask and become pontiff of the Church of the Sea God. Mr. Fool's will is my will." Alger couldn't hide his smile as he bowed. Half of his smile was for Donitz to see, showing his humility, while the other half was from the bottom of his heart. This was because the revelation meant 2 things. Mr. Fool and the Lord of Storms had reached a certain agreement. With a tacit understanding, his betrayal would no longer be pursued. Of course, he had to wear masks and could use fake names to prevent humiliation to the Church of Storms. No, truly, Alger really did advance. Becoming the pontiff of the Church of the Sea God was a critical step into reaching the throne of the Sea God. From Alger's point of view, this meant that he had officially become Mr. Fool's subordinate. In the future, be it the exchange for the identity of the Sea God or being the leader of the Church of the Fool, there would be plenty of opportunities. As for Mr. Fool, he was a great existence that was at the same level of a true God, or even higher. How could his proxy not be an angel? After the bow, Alger waited patiently for the Oracle Donitz to bring him a silver-black mask. He received the mask and wore it solemnly. While wearing the red glove, Leonard strolled along the shores of Mid-Sheeshire, enjoying the R&R earned from closing the supernatural case. As the mysterious opening of the doors and windows last night, he had already received the orders from the Holy Cathedral not to pursue it through the investigations and learn more about the manor. Regarding the order, Leonard couldn't do anything about it because he had long learned the general truth of old man Palazzorast. Mr. Dorr had returned to the real world. The Angel of Time Amon took the opportunity to steal his hypothesis ritual, advance the sequence 0 error. Almost at the same time, Mr. Fool awakened further. Through Sephir Castle, he briefly and weakly connected to the Beyonder of the Seer, Apprentice, and Marauder pathways. As an angel of the Marauder pathway, Palazzorast was undoubtedly able to sense the changes in Amon's corresponding authority in his hypothesis. He also discovered that Sephir Castle had established a connection with him. "Old man, Amon has already advanced to sequence 0. You shouldn't be much use to him now. Why do you still want to parasitize my body?" Leonard took it in a fresh morning air as he suppressed his voice and asked with a hint of concern and confusion. In his mind, Pallas scoffed. Naive. Do you think that you don't need my guidance anymore after becoming a saint and having mastered a lot of mysticism knowledge? You can choose to teach me face to face, Leonard said after some deliberation. To him, having an angel parasitizing his body was both a boon and a bane for him. The good thing was that even if he encountered the real mysticism creature, he wouldn't be completely defenseless. As long as he softly shouted, "Old man," the problem might not resolve. In addition, history and various rare mysticism knowledge from the Fourth Epoch were also rather useful. The greatest disadvantage in his life was in the hands of the parasite. If the other party had any evil intentions, he couldn't stop it. This question was once Leonard's greatest worry, but it wasn't too problematic now. This was because Mr. Fool's awakening was deepening, allowing him to completely suppress Pallas. Furthermore, Leonard had also become a high-ranking deacon of the Church of Evernight. He would definitely be under the watch of Evernight Goddess, and he could even be specially marked by her. Under such circumstances, it was impossible for a deity with the concealment authority to not discover Pallas. If Old Man had any nefarious thoughts, he would have been resolved long ago. What Leonard was most vexed about was the many things weren't too convenient as a result. Although he's already used having Old Man parasitizing his body, he would eventually casually chat with him while on the toilet. He would still prefer having time to himself in such situations. Therefore, he felt that having Old Man leave his body and letting him live in his house like an elder would be a better way of getting along with him. When he needed to deal with more dangerous matters, he could get Old Man to temporarily parasitize him. Upon hearing Leonard's suggestion, Pallas scoffed again. Are you still thinking about removing the parasitizing when you return home, and parasitize when you're out? Do you think I'm your bodyguard? Leonard laughed dryly before saying, If you haven't fully recovered and wish to continue parasitizing, I have no objections. Pallas felt silent for 2 seconds before his slightly aged voice resounded in Leonard's mind. Next up is actually the most dangerous period. For the position of the Lord of Mysteries, the Fool and Damon will definitely have a battle. When the time comes, When the time comes, under the influence of all kinds of bionic characteristics, angels of the same pathway might be affected. It's better to keep under the protection of Evernight's gaze. When the Lord of Mysteries is born, I won't even bother with you, even if you were to beg me to parasitize. Leonard was slightly taken aback as he subconsciously repeated the name, Lord of the Mysteries. This isn't something you can fully understand. Of course, with me around, there's no need to worry. Pallas sighed and said with pride. Leonard was just about to take the opportunity to ask when he suddenly saw the Red Gloves team member running over with a telegram. Reverend, a telegram from the Holy Cathedral. The team member said respectfully. Leonard nodded slightly and received the telegram. He quickly scanned it. Head to the Southern Continent and participate in the besieging of the Rose School of Thought. Southern Continent. Rose School of Thought. Leonard narrowed down to 2 key words. He quickly returned to the largest cathedral in the city and used a large-scale ritualistic matter to establish a connection with the Holy Cathedral. In his dreams, he met the Pope, Mama Mariana, and the other high-ranking officials. After a simple exchange, Leonard roughly understood the essence of the mission. The various Orthodox churches would delegate 3 to 4 demigods to head to the Southern Continent to besiege the Rose School of Thought, which had become very active after the World War. This is a long-term mission, as the Rose School demigods know how to hide their tracks. They did things in a rather secretive manner. They weren't easy to locate or lock onto. It wasn't easy to deal with them either. According to what the Pope had said, it had already considered quite good to see enough results within 3 years. During this process, the Holy Cathedral would observe the situation and rotate demigods to ensure that the Archbishop and high-ranking deacons were in a relatively stable mental state. After leaving the dream, Leonard looked around and suppressed his voice. Old man, things are a little strange. Why would the various churches suddenly target the Rose School of Thought? This wasn't an easy task. In the past few centuries, it wasn't as if the Orthodox churches hadn't made similar attempts, but they could only suppress the weak in them, without being capable of eradicating the Rose School of Thought. On the other hand, it was because there were cracks in their alliances. They were suspicious amongst each other and lacked cooperation. On the one hand, due to the Rose School of Thought's demigod's indulgence, the mental states might be abnormal. But when faced with danger, they knew how to avoid, hide, and conceal. They would throw themselves into danger for no reason. In addition, with the blessings of the chained god and the mother tree of despair, it is difficult for deities to provide precise guidance for their actions. Pallas Zorest didn't immediately answer Leonard's question. About after 10 seconds, he sighed and said, with a slightly aged voice, "This is to eliminate potential threats, and to prepare for the apocalypse." Preparing for the apocalypse? Leonard turned to Gape and wanted to say something, but he eventually fell silent. Backland Harvest Church. Emlyn White had just entered the hall, but before he could hear in his room, had changed his clothes and saw Father Uchovsky standing up at the front pews like a mountain rising from the ground. "Earth Mother has instructed us to head to the southern continent to bury the evildoers." The blessed spoke in a low voice. His voice reverberated in the hall like a slow clap of thunder, causing the praying sanguine believers to open their eyes. So the dream last night was real. Emlyn was enlightened. Last night he dreamed of the ancestor, and he dreamed that she wanted him to work with Father Uchovsky and the Rose School of Thought's temperance faction to head to the southern continent to deal with the Rose School of Thought's members who believed in the primordial moon. Of course, if there was a chance, the enemies who believed in the Mother Tree of Desire would not be spared. As he often had fake revelations, Emlyn didn't take this dream to heart. He planned on changing his clothes and completing his prayers before seeking confirmation with Father Uchovsky. He tersely acknowledged before replying to Father in a rather composed manner. "There's no rush. I'll first contact the member of the Rose School of Thought Temperance faction." Father Uchovsky nodded nonchalantly and said, "Select some volunteer sanguine too." In the Intis Republic in the capital, Trier, the supervisor of the intelligence agency, was assigning tasks and subordinates. Suddenly, his vision blurred, and he heard a distant voice ring in his ear. "Orville Dillon. Orville Dillon." As a Beyonder who joined the Intis Public Security Bureau and a member of the Secret Order, it wasn't the first time Anton encountered something like that. In the past, whenever he advanced, he would hear Hornigus Flagrea. Hornigus Flagrea. He nearly lost control of himself several times. Unlike before, the content of whispers seemed to have changed. After the ravings died down, everything in front of him returned to normal. Anton frowned and muttered to himself. "My mental state has been very stable recently, and I haven't consumed the potion or attempted to advance. Why would I hear the whispers of a secret existence? This doesn't seem to be the same as before. What does Orville mean? A lack of information? I can't understand it at all." Dillon. Yes, the brass of the Order have mentioned that our mysterious and terrifying leader once had an ancient castle called Dillon. Once I recall that existence, I can't help but shiver. Although he has returned to normal in the past 2 years, its terrifying legends and psychological destructions that he left behind is enough to give people a lifetime of nightmares. Anton calmed himself down and expressed his puzzlement. He continued to assign missions and subordinates. In front of the tombstone, Klein, who had just sat down, or just put down the white flowers, turned his head slightly as though he was listening to something. Although he didn't hear anything, as a king of angels who wielded control of the potions of the pathway's authority, he could acutely sense that something was amiss. Some secret information was being transmigrated to specific targets. "Zeratil isn't completely dead yet." Klein retracted his gaze and muttered to himself. Back then, he'd relied on his level, status, and authority to forcefully stop Zeratil's resurrection. He didn't sense anything abnormal, but after studying himself, he realized something problematic. The Beyonder characteristic he had absorbed from Zeratil was one that contained the entire set of sequence 9-to-1 Beyonder characteristics. That also meant that only included a single Miracle Invoker Beyonder characteristic. In the Snake of Fate, Auceptin had mentioned that Zeratil and the ancestor of the Tingen's family had both taken an additional Miracle Invoker Beyonder characteristic in them. Therefore, the reality of the situation was that there was no doubt that there was an additional Miracle Invoker on Zeratil, which had vanished. As further, there was an additional Beyonder characteristic like Scholar of Yore or Bizarre Sorcerer. Klein had no way of guessing due to the lack of understanding of Zeratil. Based on this situation, Klein had long suspected that Zeratil wasn't completely dead. Of course, if the other party wanted to revive, it wouldn't be that simple. This was because using too simple a method would result in the lack of concealment. It would definitely be discovered by a higher sequence Beyonder of the same pathway, and thus an effective premonition method would be set up. When Zeratul was able to separate a sequence 2 beyond a characteristic from himself, he was undoubtedly a sequence 1 intended mysteries. There weren't many enemies that could restrain him, ones that had dealt with using the most curious of attitudes. Therefore, Klein believed that he had used the potion of beyond a characteristics that he had discovered, and from himself to seize up the opportunity. However, it wasn't to directly use the revive. Instead, it was the very way to make plenty of preparations. He needed an opportunity or some mediums to take the preparations play out. From the looks of it, he hid the portions of the beyond a characteristic that contained the miracle invoker beyond a characteristic in particular matter and concealed it carefully. Otherwise, when I advanced to attend to mysteries, I should have been able to use Sephra Castle to directly see it. Yes, the next step should be to use some concealed method to guide or entice a specific target to revive him. He hasn't accommodated a uniqueness, so he can't broadcast on all channels. Besides, he has to be sure that the advanced me or Amon doesn't hear the corresponding content and spoils his plans. Therefore, the number of targets he can entice is rather limited. All members of the Secret Order, or the potion of members, Klein, who had genuflecting, nodded in thought. He exhaled and grumbled without hiding anything. Why are high sequence beyonders of the Seer pathway so difficult to kill? There were all sorts of preparations and trump cards. This made him truly understand why the goddess didn't directly kill the ancestors of the Antigonus family. For the half-fool might mean a new lease of life. However, an intricate and complicated setup often means that the ability to take risks is inferior. Who knows if Zeratul's resurrection plan will benefit some lucky Secret Order member? The possibility of it happening might even be higher than him returning to the fog of his history. Also, there's a chance of being interfered, influenced, or exploited by other deities. Klein sneered immediately as he slowly stood up. He temporarily didn't have any thoughts of finding the miracle invoker beyond a characteristic. This was because, under the immense pressure brought by error, he had no choice but to seize the opportunity and strengthen his humanity and stabilize the mental state he had to Kara Eldoran city in the spirit world to revive the river waters of the river of eternal darkness. So as to accommodate the fool's uniqueness, he had no time to waste on non-urgent matters. By the time he successfully advanced and restored the new balance of the situation he was in, he didn't mind heading to Intis and dealing with the members of the Secret Order in search for the hidden treasure vault that Zeratul had hidden. This would completely put the angel who had lived since the fourth epoch the eternal rest. He reined in his thoughts and lowered his head and looked at the tombstone in front of him. Klein slowly retreated, inserted his hands into his pocket, and turned to the side and entered the spirit world. In recent times, he was like a tourist and mysticism occasionally. He would return to where he used to be, and occasionally, under the guidance of fate, he would casually travel around the spirit world, heading to different fervent realities and witness different scenes. As a result, his self-awareness and self-consciousness gradually recovered and solidified. He was now able to use his anchors to suppress the awakening will of the celestial worthy to a certain extent. This made him a lot more stable than when he met the Evernight goddess. In the spirit world, the saturated layers that resembled the abstract oil painting, Klein watered aimlessly as he walked a few steps in the direction that wasn't in the usual meaning of the word direction. Following the guidance of fate and spirituality, he left this place and returned to the real world. The first thing that happened before him was a small square and cathedral belonging to the Evernight goddess. At this moment, many people were entering the cathedral looking delighted. In Backland, Klein looked at the sun that perpetrated the thin clouds and followed the crowd to the cathedral door. The moment he passed entrances, he gazed suddenly. The moment he passed the entrance, his gaze suddenly froze. He saw Benson. No! Pause. At this moment, many people were entering the cathedral looking delighted. I'm in Backland. Klein looked up at the sun and penetrated the thin clouds and followed the crowd to the cathedral doors. The moment he passed the entrance, his gaze suddenly froze. He saw Benson. Benson Moretti. The black-haired, brown-eyed man's face looked somewhat similar to Klein's. However, the slightly older looking man had his hair combed neatly backwards. Revealing his broad forehead, he stood beside the altar wearing a well-ironed suit, looking a little nervous. Klein stared for 2 seconds before quickly looking away. Following that, he swept his gaze across the front pew and saw Melissa! In a white, conservative dress. Compared to before, the young lady's face no longer had that adolescent look on it. There was more meat on her face, making her look no longer skinny. She kept chanting with people around her, skillfully handling all kinds of matters and socializing. She still dressed in such an old-fashioned manner. Thankfully, she didn't wear all black. The corners of Klein's lips curled up as he mumbled. He walked to the corner of the cathedral and found a seat to sit down. About 10 minutes later, Melissa finished her work and sat in her seat. The joyous music started to play, and they gradually turned solemn. The lady wearing a clean, white wedding gown held her father's arm and... Is this... Pause. The lady wearing a clean white wedding gown held her father's arm in one hand and held her mother's arm in the other. She walked down the aisle towards the altar. Benson, who was standing near the altar, gulped a mouthful of saliva and couldn't help but smile. This was his wedding. Klein, who was in the corner, saw the scene and leaned back a little. He lowered his head slightly and muttered, "He smiles like a curly-haired baboon." After the bride was brought to the front of the altar by her parents, she bowed to Benson before facing the sacred emblem of the priest. Benson bowed and turned around. Oh my god. After the bride was brought to the front of the altar by her parents, she bowed to Benson before facing the sacred emblem of the priest. Benson bowed and turned around. After the bride's parents sat down, the priest said, "Dear friends and family, we're gathered here today to witness the celebration of union on this couple of marriage. Under the auspices of the benevolent goddess. Praise the lady." All the guests present raised their right hands as long as they were believers of the Evernight goddess before drawing 4 points in the clockwise fashion, drawing out the star. This included Klein. When everyone settled down, the priest turned his head and said to the bride, "Do you, Lucy Brooke, take Benson Moretti to be your lawfully wedded husband, promising to love and cherish through joy and sorrow, sickness and health, whatever challenges you may face, for as long as you both shall live?" The lady named Lucy looked at the Evernight goddess's sacred emblem and nodded. "I do." Benson's smile reappeared. The priest turned to look at him and said, "Do you, Benson Moretti, take Lucy Brooke to be your lawfully wedded wife, promising to love and cherish through joy and sorrow, sickness and health, and whatever challenges you may face, for as long as you both shall live?" Benson immediately nodded and said, "I do." Upon seeing this and hearing him, Melissa's vision turned blurry. Her eyes winced along with joy. After going through all sorts of ups and downs, their family was finally welcoming a new member. Suddenly, she turned her head subconsciously to the corner and saw an empty seat. There was no one there. Melissa immediately pursed her lips and shook her head slightly. After scanning the area for several seconds, she slowly retracted her gaze and looked at the altar. It wasn't until the priest announced that Benson and Lucy were man and wife did Melissa smile again. In the Hall family manor of Eastchester County, Klein walked out of the void. He had stabilized his mind and could now seek treatment of a psychiatrist. At the same time, he needed to solve a problem. So he... Cuttlefish is evil with that one, bro. You could also, you could also just have him see his siblings again. Like, that would be super cool. Like, that would be super cool. We could also just have him see his siblings again. I would love that. Instead of him having to hide away in a corner while his brother is getting married. And Klein's on the verge of a mental breakdown, so he actually needs to go and do this to make sure that he can go seek treatment and help. Evil on that one. On the veranda covered by the autumn sun, Audrey wore a refreshing vacation straw hat and sat on the lawn chair that she leisurely flipped through the fashion magazine. There was an exquisite pair of pastries and cup of black tea made from leaves from her family manor on the round table beside her. Suddenly she looked over the edge of the veranda and saw Gammon. Oh my god. Baby, I missed you. I missed him so much. I missed him so much. Oh my god. Walking over the black trench coat and silk top hat. Audrey turned her head and glanced to her. I love Gammon Sparrow. I'm gonna get a poster of him, put it on my wall right here. I'm gonna get a cardboard. You know what? I need everybody to be on the hunt for something. I want a cardboard cutout of Gammon Sparrow, and I want to put him right here, and he's just gonna chill. If we can find me a cardboard cutout of Gammon Sparrow, I'd be very happy. Audrey turned her head and glanced at her maid Annie and realized that she, like the servants around her, ignored the stranger who had appeared out of nowhere. At the same time, Audrey noticed the surroundings seemed to darken a little. She stood up, lifting the corners of her skirt, and curtsied. During this process, she had originally planned on seriously discussing the matter between the psychology alchemist and Mr. Rath, but on second thought, she smiled again and said in an infectious and brisk tone, "Mr. World, are you here to speak psychological counsel? Are you here to seek psychological counseling? Or to deal with Mr. Rath's problem?" If it was just the former, Audrey believed that the world, Gammon Sparrow, would let her meet him above the grey fog. That would be more convenient and faster, therefore this angel was definitely here under Mr. Fool's instructions to complete a mission in the real world. At the same time, she acutely sensed that Mr. World's emotions were rather mixed. He was satisfied and happy, yet depressed and sad. As Gammon Sparrow's main doctor, the situation was rare. It often meant that he needed a certain degree of counseling or comfort. I would also get a body pillow. I would. He'd just hang it right back there. Degree of counseling or comfort? Both. Klein pulled a chair over and sat by the round table. "Do you want black tea or coffee?" Although Audrey hadn't taken the initiative to investigate Mr. World, she had met Dwayne Dantes many times before. They had attended meetings, banquets, and dances together, and under the keen observation of a spectator, many details weren't secrets. For example, Audrey knew that when Dwayne Dantes was Gammon Sparrow, he preferred food that was sweet with a little sourness. He liked to drink coffee with sugar without milk. For black tea, he loved having lemon slices out of the pastries. The first choice was the cream pastries. He loved foie gras, roasted chicken skin, and loved ribeye steaks more than beef tenderloin. His love for desi pie far exceeds breads. In addition, Audrey was undoubtedly certain that the other party was a spice enthusiast. He had high expectations of condiments, and his preference in the aspects were inclined towards that of Desi County. Due to these details, Audrey believed that it would be very rude to not invite Mr. World to enjoy the pastries on the table, and the beverage of choice to match these snacks was undoubtedly either black tea or coffee. Black tea. Saving that information for later. Miss Justice relaxed an ambial attitude, making it feel much more easy. He felt that the state would be more beneficial in subsequent placating. Since this was the case, it would definitely be better for him to enjoy the pastries and receive psychological treatment. "Give me another cup of black tea and add the lemon slices," Audrey said to her maid Annie. Annie was surprised by the instructions. Finding everything reasonable, she turned around and walked to the veranda's entrance, giving instructions to the servant standing there. Audrey wasn't in a rush and began the psychological treatment process, nor did she ask Mr. World why he was in the complicated mood. She smiled to carefully introduce the local produce of the manor. She made the comparison to Dwayne Dantes' Migro Manor and naturally informed him of the present situations regarding his butler and servants. Some stayed in the manor and continued the previous working with Migro Manor's production. It was perfectly fine sustaining them. There was even more surplus that could be converted into funds to repair the houses that would be donned to charity organizations. Audrey only sent up the accountant and assistant butler and the staff member from the foundations to do a check on the time. Some felt that without the true employer, they could plan their role and to the fullest potential. They felt ashamed of the salary they received and chose to resign and look for work. Some of them developed an interest in charity work and found a new calling in life and joined one of the foundations under Audrey's name. Klein listened silently, occasionally raising the question as though he was chatting with a friend. When the tea was served, he took a sip and nodded in satisfaction. After watching him eat a piece of cream cake, Audrey's green eyes darted around as she said with a smile, "Food doesn't seem to be necessary for an angel, right?" "Yes, it's just a hobby," Klein answered simply before adding, "It can be used to maintain one's humanity." Maintaining one's humanity. Audrey ruminated over the sentence. "This is to resist the godhood within you. Your mental problems come under such a category?" She gently guided the topic to his psychological treatment. Klein nodded slightly and said, "That's right. You should have experienced it. Every beyonder who has obtained godhood will definitely experience it in some way. The difference is in the qualitativeness. In the quantity. Not qualitativeness, quantity." Audrey seriously recalled and said, "I occasionally dream of a ball of light that illuminated the entire world. Occasionally I would hear an indescribable sound and would see a blurry, strange, illusory ocean that seemed to contain many conflicting thoughts. I'm certain that it was an illusion, but it was also so real." "Well, I occasionally dream of a huge cross. I heard someone praying softly, but I couldn't tell the specifics no matter how hard I tried. The second one is likely from Sephra, Chaos Sea, and the indirect corruption from within. The third is visionary, Adam being an expert influence in the Beyonders of the same pathway. The first one is the primordial one, awakening in the ancient sun god's body and the ancient god almighty." Klein thought for a moment before saying in a deep voice, "The true creator created all living things and also split into various beyonded characteristics. This is the source of being extraordinary. Therefore, every one of us has godhood in our bodies. They have the original creator's will, and more beyond characteristics gathered in more he will awaken and replace us." He used the most common and most ambiguous method to explain the root of the problem in a way that wouldn't lead to corruption. This had been discussed to a certain extent in the Tarot Club, so Audrey didn't find it difficult to understand. She said thoughtfully, "That's why one needs to use humility to resist godhood. At the same time, anchors are needed. Yes, the light you dream of, the indescribable sounds you hear, and the illusory ocean that you see are all a type of corruption. And the gigantic cross and prayer sound shouldn't be a result of the influence in the visionary. Adam has beyonders of the same pathway," Klein explained in two different situations. Audrey subconsciously sat up straight and looked around. She appeared a little afraid. "Garamond Sparrow actually said the name of he who must not be named." "Don't worry, he can't hear me with me by your side," Klein explained. Audrey retracted her gaze and didn't hide her surprise and astonishment. "You've already advanced to sequence 1? Isn't that too fast? He had only become a sequence 2 angel slightly more than half a year ago." Klein answered frankly, "More like a king of angels." Audrey was silent for a few seconds. She pursed her lips and said with a vexed smile, "I nearly had a psychological problem just now." Klein chuckled as well. "To me, becoming a king of angels isn't necessarily a good thing. Yes, high sequence beyonders of the spectator pathway have to pay particular attention to their mental state. To other pathways, the enchantment of godhood and the worsening corruption is rather obvious. But this isn't the case for spectator. You have to constantly inspect and check yourself. Any tiny change to one's personality and their understanding of things should be traced back to the source. It must be confirmed that there are no problems and that the difference can be considered a normal change. Otherwise, you'll unknowingly become another person who can coldly kill those who you originally wanted to protect. It's not easy for beyonders of the spectator pathway to go crazy, but it's also the easiest for them to go crazy." Audrey replied in shock, "I understand." She continued the topic and began asking, "Your mental state is unstable and you have a psychological problem. Is it because you became a king of angels in such a short period of time that I exceeded your expectations?" "Yes." Klein drank a mouthful of black tea and said, "The will that doesn't belong to me within me has mostly awakened. I can only barely suppress it and maintain some basic level of mental stability." As Audrey listened to Garamond Sparrow's description, she used her beyonder powers to observe and analyze him. After the other party finished speaking, she revealed a comforting smile and said, "I roughly understand your current situation. The initial treatment plan is divided in 2 steps. I'll first encounter your mind world and awaken the memories related to your humanity. Oh, it doesn't include the kind that will make you so miserable that you wish to give up. Then, when your godhood reacts, I'll use placate, hypnotism, and other beyonder powers to reduce the corruption negative effects it brings so you can help you better suppress it." Klein was silent for a moment before saying, "Okay." he decided to use his unique trait of maintaining lucidity in a dream and mind world, and first gathering up the memories related to the fool before grafting them to the worms of spirit above the grey fog. At that moment, Audrey got her maid, Annie, to bring over a white silk scarf. Then she used the thin scarf to cover her eyes and ears. Klein watched the scene in puzzlement as he waited for Miss Justice to explain. After trying the scarf, Audrey smiled and said, "This is a hypnotism that allows me to steal the spirit body's perception. This way, even if I were to enter your mind world, I wouldn't be able to hear or see those awakened memories. Of course, I'll keep my spiritual intuition, otherwise I wouldn't be able to find your island of consciousness. And I wouldn't be able to sense the changes in your godhood. I could have just hypnotized you, but you're already king of angels. I'm worried that I'll be affected by your consciousness. So I'm using a symbolic ritual to achieve the state of being hypnotized and strengthen the effects." She calmly explained. Calmly, Klein's mood without him realizing it. He nodded gently and said, "All right, let's begin." After opening the door to the body of heart and mind, Klein carefully extracted the memories related to the fool. He gathered them together and grafted them above the grey fog. Following that, he saw the blonde-haired Audrey, who had light white silk scarf covering her eyes, appear into the ancient stone steps. Step by step, she landed onto the mind island via the sea of collective subconscious. After some hesitation, Klein no longer allowed his consciousness to stay high in the sky. He gave up the corresponding control and allowed them to return to the fuse together. He didn't After some hesitation, Klein no longer allowed his consciousness to stay high in the sky. He gave up their corresponding control and allowed them to return to fuse together. If he didn't do that, he would maintain absolute rationality and subsequent treatment, making him unable to move all kinds of memories and lose possibility to strengthen his humanity. This meant that Audrey's treatment was destined to fail right from the start. After arriving in the mind island, it resembled to the dream. Using her spiritual intuition, Audrey stopped and spread her arms slightly. She recalled her parents' love for her, the excitement she felt when she first became a Beyonder, and the joy she felt after helping others to change her emotions and emit corresponding fluctuations. This is a method of awakening Garamond Sparrow's memories related to his humanity. It was a Beyonder manifestation of the effects of empathy. Scenes that were worth cherishing and those hidden deep within flashed across Audrey's mind one after another. Beneath her feet, but the surface of the island and representing Klein's mind, fiery light points seeped out of the soil and floated up. Every point of light presented a different scene. A kid taking a stride forward in his short legs, receiving ice cream. A student secretly reading novels from comics under the... A kid taking strides forward with his short legs, receiving an ice cream. A student secretly reading novels and comics under the covers of a textbook. A teenager sitting in front of his computer and playing games with full focus, hearing the sound of keys suddenly being inserted into the keyhole. He jumped up and performed a forced shutdown on his computer, rushing back to his room, happy that his actions weren't discovered as he bounced in his step. Going to the living room, he asked his mother for pocket money, because appearing beside his father to casually ask questions about his studies. The young adult and his companions pushing a bashful friend to the corridor right up to the person he had a crush on, then turning around and laughing loudly. A young adult with some hint of adolescence to him stealing a glance downstairs, watching a figure leave, but unable to open his mouth no matter what. An employee with a slightly protruding belly waving his hand impatiently when he returned home from the holidays after telling his parents not to serve him food or set up blind dates for him. He sees his parents' white hair and loses himself in thought when he calms down. A scholarly-looking man with his brother and sister moving out. When they say dirt and dust on each other's faces, they laugh. Klein sat at the round table in the veranda, one hand holding his top hat and the other hand hanging in midair, as though he wanted to cover his face. 2 transparent drops of water slowly slid past the 2 sides of his nose. He's crying. 2 transparent drops of water slowly slipped past the 2 sides of his nose bridge and dripped into the void. Klein closed his eyes, his expression soft and pained. In his mind, oh my god, no, I'm gonna cry. I wasn't prepared to see Klein cry. I'm not no, I don't like it, I don't want it. My poor baby angel Klein. Audrey seemed to have transformed into a whirlpool of emotions as she pulled together similar memories. After the entire island was covered with fire-like points of light, and faint gray fog emerged. On the fog, there was a door of light that was dyed blackish blue, formed an illusory and brilliant spherical light. The main body of each spherical light was composed of transparent, rigid, or star-like worms and insects. They embraced each other and intertwined like mythical creatures. The door of light looked a little odd at first glance, but if one looked closely, they would discover that its surroundings were dark. It was as though it was wearing a hooded black robe. Thus, on the whole, it looked like an unknown mysterious person hiding under a robe. In the next second, the slippery illusory tentacle appeared under the deep black robe of mysterious persons. At that moment, although Audrey's consciousness couldn't see or hear anything, her spiritual intuition gave her a strong sense of danger. She had a feeling that the sea consistency and corruption was about to drown her. No, this isn't an illusion. She believed that things continued to develop like this. She would get infected with several mental illnesses and even go crazy and lose control on the spot. Audrey was about to placate herself when all her might weakened, and the corruption ahead of her was like a firelight. Light dots floating above the island rapidly gathered and illuminating the grayish-white fog, diluting the darkness around the strange door of light, making the tentacle covered in mysterious patterns shrink back. This was also the reason why Klein couldn't receive psychological treatment only after barely suppressing the awakening celestial worthy's consciousness. This made Audrey sense the awakening of danger, and she quickly did a psychoanalysis. Then she immediately placated the corruption, performing in true act of hypnosis. After repeating it over and over again, Audrey looked at the unknown amount of time before she finally managed to obtain the immediate results she expected. She then left Sparrow's mind island and returned to her body. The treatment was very difficult, so she didn't use a virtual persona and directly used her body of heart and mind. After sensing the end of the treatment, Klein raised his hand and wiped his face, allowing the fool's memories grafted above the gray fog to return to his true body. Whoa. A few seconds later, Audrey removed the white silk scarf wrapped on her eyes, nose, snipping herself out of her self-hypnosis. She looked at Mr. Worlds opposite her and muttered to herself impognantly, "Is this the mental problem brought about by godhood? How terrifying." Klein nodded slightly and said, "Yes, every angel has one. The only difference is whether it's serious or very serious. Saints have it too. Even low and mid-sequence beyonders, who aren't demigods, have it too." Audrey added with Sparrow's former explanation. To a lower mid-sequence beyonder, the remnant mental imprint of the former owner of the characteristic is relatively more dangerous. Klein picked up the golden-lined cup and took a sip. "This is the cruel law of the mysterious world. This is because the beyonder powers come from external objects, from beyonder characteristics." Audrey nodded before shaking her head gently. As she complimented, she said, I don't think it's the pessimistic, I don't think it's that pessimistic, just like the source of every human life comes from something else, air, bread, meat, water, etc. When we absorb them, we will also absorb their negative effects, accumulating all kinds of problems that eventually make us fall sick. However, this doesn't mean that we have completely resisted them and treat them as external objects. Once they're absorbed, there will always be some part of it that belongs to us. I didn't express it well, but I believe you should understand what I mean. Klein was taken aback for a moment before replying thoughtfully. Beyonder acquisition of the beyonder characteristic is like a human having food. Then one should have peace of mind and not have too many repulsive thoughts about resisting it. But also working alongside it and suppressing it is also fusing together with it. Roughly like that. After Audrey said that, she laughed self-deprecatingly. However, this also seems to imply a negative message. Humans will eventually die, but beyonders. She didn't finish her sentence and was willing to agitate the patient opposite her. She switched topics and said, "Pay a visit to another 2 times this week. I'll be able to stabilize you under normal conditions. Yes, normal conditions. Also, you can reminisce about things when you're free, or go somewhere you yearn to go." Klein nodded and said, "What do you have in mind about race suggestions?" The smile on Audrey's face slowly disappeared as her expression gradually turned serious. "Do you have any suggestions?" Klein put down his teacup and calmly said, "Strictly speaking, the danger you bring is divided into two categories. One is when you actively or passively involve yourself in certain matters, attracting powerful enemies to your side, implicating your family, relatives, friends, and the innocent. The other is that your very existence allows some factions to target the people you value the most, doing so to threaten you. For the latter, unless you're dead, there's no way for you to ever avoid them. Of course, most of these things are a result of the former. If you give up on all your current identities in mysticism world and only be Mr. Full's believer and Miss Audrey Hall from now on, no longer taking the initiative to participate in matters related to Beyonders or other matters with unpredictable elements, you can avoid most of the risks of the former and drastically reduce the latter. Such are circumstances with the Evernight Goddess favoring the Hall family, and the Fool's protection provided to you is enough to deal with the rare instances of dangers and trusting your family's safety. This way, there's no need to split off another identity." Audrey fell silent for a while. She bit her lower lip indiscernibly and asked, "What if I do want to split off an identity? As long as you let that identity believe in Mr. Fool, it's not much different from what I just said now. The only difference is that from the point of forth, you'll have to stay away from your family and friends and live with another identity. Klein's voice sank silently as he said in a serious tone, "Also, are you really fine with Hermes splitting off an identity for you?" Audrey's emotion was dissipated in questions. Her eyes flickered as she said, "However, splitting identities should be beyond her powers of the sequence 3 dream walker. She definitely wouldn't be able to accomplish it by herself." The corners of Klein's mouth curled up as he suddenly asked, "You're able to use the Pride Mask to enter the Garden of Eden directly?" As Audrey couldn't take the initiative to mention the psychology alchemist, her very directly pointed out. Audrey nodded gently, surprised, puzzled, and guessed something. "I'm unwilling to pay the equivalent price, and," without waiting for her to finish, Klein said in a cold expression, "On the one hand, Adam has drifted from Mr. Fool and nearly killed me. On the other hand, with the apocalypse approaching, the Fool has prophesied something when the time comes. He might fall asleep again." Was I right? "As his blessed, I won't be able to escape a similar fate. The payment you need to pay is that, when such an anomaly happens, perform certain dangerous things according to Mr. Fool's instructions and try hard to awaken him." Without giving Miss Justice a chance to digest the sentence, Klein extended his right hand and grabbed a few times at the void ahead of him, pulling out a grayish-white cold persona mask. Using his status and Audrey's trust in him, he forcefully summoned the protection and pride mask from the historical void. "It's connected to my mind, so no one else can use it." Audrey subconsciously pointed out the problem when he saw this. "Give me a strand of your hair," Klein said calmly. Audrey didn't think too much of it. She plucked out a blonde strand of her hair and handed it to Gammon Sparrow. Klein took the strand of hair and wrapped it in his eye holes of the persona mask. Then he held the silk hat in one hand and the grayish-white mask in the other hand, slowly stood up. During the process, he mobilized Zephyr Castle and deceived the rules. Klein wore the pride mask without facing any resistance. Immediately he saw human-clothed animals walking upright. He had entered the Garden of Eden directly. Looking at the black cathedral in the middle of the city, Klein curled his lips and took out the staff of the stars and wore a silk top hat over his head. My God. What was the... Let me look really quick. That's not the worst. Okay, we might, because my throat is really starting to hurt. So, let me look really quick. And I don't want my throat to, like, cut out and get really bad. I could stop at 366. Okay. So I'm gonna have to stop. Yeah, so I'm gonna have to stop. It's lagging a little bit. This is gonna be the last chapter, because I was just looking at, like, where else I could stop. so this is going to be the last chapter, and then tomorrow I'm going to do 366 to 380, and I'll just add those 4 chapters onto tomorrow's stream, and then it'll still be on track. I'm just going to have to break it up a little more. Yeah. I don't want my voice to get all fucked up. Yeah. I don't want my voice to get all fucked up for tomorrow or Sunday. I want it to have like a nice smooth, and I've been like really straining it to make sure it doesn't get messed up. I will. The moment they sensed the intrusion of the stranger, the animal wearing cloaks and exquisite long skirts stirred as they looked at Klein with a desire to attack. At that instant, Klein, who was wearing a pride mask, felt as though his enemy of the entire city. He wasn't unfamiliar with the situation in the Garden of Eden. He knew that the upright animals dressed as humans were in different aspects of the bestial desire. They were more like conceptual and abstract entities instead of being physical. In other words, they didn't have spirit body threads, so they wouldn't suffer any physical harm. Otherwise, Klein could have hoisted these animals up, allowing them to sway within the wind. The next second, within the bear whose suit was about to rip apart, taking the lead, the animal in the Garden of Eden either bared their fangs or let out growls as they surged towards Klein's forms all directions. Once bitten or hugged by them, one would corrupt by the corresponding bestial desires. One could only rely on the willpower and various beyond powers of the spectator pathway to resist them. Faced with such a situation, Klein, who was wearing a half-top hat, trapped the staff of the stars without panicking the slightest. He raised his left hand, spread his fingers, and slightly closed them. The Garden of Eden formed a Gothic-style architecture and suddenly covered the layer of gloom, as if a giant curtain draped over it. Realm of the mysteries, the embryonic form of the divine kingdom. Klein sealed off the Garden of Eden to prevent the powerhouse inside from escaping. Following that, he walked forward one step at a time, like a gentleman taking an after-meal stroll. The animals who mimicked humans were wearing human clothes, brushed to the side where they naturally changed directions and embraced each other. The phantom, with its flickering tongue, devoured a canine creature filled with a desire to mate. The strange person, with a colorful spider as a face, bound a huge red-eyed rat up with a web. A violent werewolf bit and landed languid cat. The brown bear walking upright gave the fox with shiny fur a bear hug. These animals that represented bestial desire fused together as they cancelled out other parts of their pair. Klein, who had grasped the authority of grafting, slowly walked through them and walked though he inspected the concept of humanity and bestial desires. Just like that, he walked to the 80-meter-tall cathedral and stopped. Then he lifted his head and looked at the skulls embedded in the black pillar for 2 seconds. Klein's expression didn't change at all. He raised his left hand and pressed down his hat and walked up the stairs into the cathedral. He immediately saw the grand and spacious hall with the huge cross and grayish-white dragon statue wrapped around the cross. In front of the cross, with a small long table with 5 seats on both sides of the long table. At this moment, at the end of the long table, there was a man in a black wheelchair. His face was abnormally pale, and his pale yellow brows were long. His hair was neatly combed, and there were some wrinkles on his forehead. This was the leader of the psychology alchemists, Polly Derlou. At the same time, he was also a famous hermit, Eric Drake, and the king of Blackthorn, Barrows Hopkins. Of course, whether he was his main body or one of his various identities, no one knew. Seeing Gavin Sparrow, who was wearing a silk top hat and black trench coat, walk over slowly and in an extreme impressive manner, Polly Derlua, I can never say it, clasped his armrest and wheelchair on both sides. When the other party entered the Garden of Eden, he didn't hesitate to leave his mind city, but he failed to do so. The eyes beneath the pride mask that seemed to move towards his forehead seemed to be mocking him. Polly quickly placated his emotions before his eyes lit up with pure, illusory light. The light formed the pair of the holy wings in front of him under the layers of wings that the prized person of light genuflecting in prayer. This was an angel. At the same time, an elder with white hair and ordinary looks appeared to the left of Polly. It was to his right, a priest with a pale blonde beard covering his face stood upright. Ancient angel Hermes, visionary Adam. Klein didn't stop walking forward as he muttered to himself, I wish for all illusions to disappear. Just as he said that, he raised his left hand and snapped his fingers. The angel of light, Hermes, and visionary Adam instantly dissipated and vanished, leaving behind a single Pali, sitting in a black wheelchair. He had just used the beyonder powers of the Dreamwalker to weave a few almost realistic images. Once the enemy believed that they were real, they would become real. Although the damage that caused didn't have any physical manifestations, it would make the target die for unknown reason. Polly has made countless targets die from fright and such nightmares. Unfortunately, he has encountered Klein. I love how cocky Klein is getting. Unfortunately, he had encountered Klein, a king of angels who could maintain his lucidity in dreams and also possessed true vision. He used the wishes power of Miracle Invoker to easily crack the illusion. Seeing this, Polly's eyelids twitched. Without any hesitation, he pushed himself up from the black wheelchair. During this process, his body rapidly expanded as he transformed into a huge grayish-white dragon. Dragon transformation, an incorporeal mythical creature form. Compared to the sequence form manipulator, the incorporeal mythical creature from the Pali exhibited was even larger. Furthermore, there was a certain change to his head, making it closer to a lizard and not a human. With the golden vertical pupils and scales that were intertwined with mysterious patterns, making it cold and warped. As the mythical creature from form appeared, all kinds of thoughts, consciousness, desires, and wills swept out like a storm, attacking Klein's mind island in half illusory and half realistic ways. This was the combination of mind deprivation and mental plague, allowing every creature that was affected to experience corruption and go crazy on the spot. To an angel, such attacks were the most sinister. This was because all of them had certain problems with their mental state. They could lose control at any moment, and due to the tilting of scales, Klein, who was wearing a grayish-white pride mask and half-top hat, didn't stop walking forward. He didn't attempt to avoid the plague storm at mental level. He remained firm and stoic as he walked step by step towards Pali. In the next second, transparent insects appeared on the back of his hand. His clothes expanded as though countless indescribable monsters were crawling underneath. Suddenly, Klein lost control and turned into a huge whirlpool formed with transparent maggots. The vortex extended a slippery tentacle in strange patterns in the middle. There was a door of light that was dyed bluish-black. Upon seeing the scene, even the incorporeal mythical creature form, Polly found it difficult to stop his thoughts from coming to a halt as he stood rooted in the ground. The massive grayish-white dragon seemed to have become a puppet. Its head was filled with mush and its joints were all rusted. He had stared straight into the great existence that he shouldn't look at. Above the grey fog, Klein, who was sitting in the fool's seat, immediately dispersed the out-of-control historical projection. After entering the Garden of Eden and pulling out the Staff of the Stars, he had switched places with the historical void projection and the worms of spirit inside Suffer Castle he had summoned, and directly returned to the ancient palace. He clearly knew that visionary Adam had gone to the forsaken land of the gods and was attempting to fuse with the true creator, making it impossible for him to descend with his true body at any time in a short, foreseeable future. At most, he would send out one of his other identities, but it wouldn't be useless against a king of kings of angels. However, Klein still felt that he should be cautious, lest he fall into Adam's or Ramon's trap. Following that, he summoned himself from the fog of history. He wore a pride mask and held the Staff of the Stars in his hand and projected himself back into the Cathedral of the Garden of Eden. Seeing that Polly had lost most of his rationality and was unable to control his body, Klein didn't directly control his spirit body threads and turned into a mind dragon. Now, his marionette had maintained the pace as he slowly approached the target. In Polly's eyes, Gammon Sparrow was like a death incarnate. He approached us slowly and was on his own rhythm, but there was no chance of escaping. At that moment, the grayish-white dragon statue on the huge cross behind him moved. Almost simultaneously, Klein raised his left hand and pulled downwards. The shadow curtain that enveloped the Garden of Eden instantly contracted, enveloping a huge cross with the grayish-white dragon statue and Polly within it. In the next second, Klein raised the curtain. The incorporeal mythical creature and Polly had transformed into a combined gigantic cross as though they were a knotted giant tree, and the grayish-white dragon statue connected to the entirety of the Garden of Eden, turning the city outside into cathedral into an abnormally illusory sea that contained all colors. This wasn't the Chaos Sea, rather the loaning of its strength. It had been tampered with by Klein and resembled. At that moment, Gammon Sparrow, who had been walking slowly forward, arrived at the knotted giant tree. He raised his right hand, and under the vacant yet slightly fearful gaze of Polly, he lashed out the Staff of the Stars. This came with an embedded and many gems hit the heavy target, spreading into two. Between the sound of the parts falling to the ground, Polly's body had been combined with a huge cross fell to the ground. The leader of the psychology alchemist died before he could even say his last words. While waiting for Polly's beyond a characteristic to appear, Klein looked around and chuckled inwardly. As expected, Hermes' true goal was to use the faction backing Miss Justice to destroy the Garden of Eden and use it to escape from Adam. The mind dragon Erhorg words made him seal his resolve. However, he should have still left a few sealed artifacts for me. There's no need to abscond with everything. Could it be that the rabbit should be wearing the greed mask instead of wrath? The psychology alchemist might appear again in the future, but the one controlling it in the shadows is no longer the Twilight Hermit Order, but Hermes himself. Okay, that was it. That was all we had. That was last chapter. Tomorrow we're going to pick up where we left off at chapter 1366. And we'll read chapter 1366 to 1380 because I was told to read those parts together and to not change. But yeah, we'll be good. Okay. My voice will be fine. I just need to give it a break. It's just a little tired from this weekend and I don't want to strain it, but we will be fine. Thank you guys so much for joining. I will see you guys tomorrow at 7 p.m. PST and then on Sunday at 7 p.m. PST. Last 2 streams. Crazy. Other than that, I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day, a wonderful rest of your night, wherever you are at, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.